Within the middle of nowhere, Vermont, an elderly couple heard the sound of 3 loud knocks on their door. They opened the door and saw 2 children, a boy and a girl. Parents will be here soon. May we come in? The children did not make eye contact and just stood there in the doorway. The elderly couple were hesitant, but after a while they let the boy and the girl inside. The kids settled on the couch while the wife made some hot cocoa, and the husband asked them questions that went unanswered. The wife returned and noticed that her cat was scared and angry with the children. May we please use the restroom? The wife looked at the kids and she finally saw them. The children's eyes were as black as a starless universe. She directed them to the bathroom and returned to her husband, who was covering his face with his hand. Did you see their eyes? The husband then showed her his hand was full of blood from a nosebleed. The power suddenly went out and the house turned as dark as the kids' eyes. The wife headed to the restroom and was confronted by the voice of the kids at the end of the hall uttering, "Our parents are here." The kids then exited the house, leaving the door wide open. The wife then noticed that there were 2 men at the end of the driveway. They were very tall and slender. The wife waved but did not receive the same friendly gesture. The 2 men and children then drove away together in one car. The power then came back on a little later after the kids left. Throughout the next week, weird things happened in the house. 3 out of 4 cats went missing and the 4th had been found dead in the pool of its own blood. The husband continued to have nosebleeds and finally went to the doctor where he was diagnosed with very aggressive skin cancer. Welcome back. This is the 100th episode of I Came With Fire podcast, not including all the live shows. There are quite a few of those. I really don't know how many there are, but for context, TJ has been doing his live show, Take Up Your Cross, now for just a couple months and is finally hitting his 100th episode. But I have been doing this since roughly this time in 2023, and we're finally hitting our 100th episode because there's been a couple of weeks where we didn't have episodes. And you know what? I just decided just now that I'm actually going to spill the tea on some nonsense that has like origin stories of this podcast, right? So if you've been following this show, like some of you guys have since the beginning, there's a few of you out there, Joey, Marcus, I know you guys know who you are. There you go. Shout outs on the podcast for you guys. Then you know the story, right? So I started out and I had a dude who I basically was working with and supervised start this podcast with me. Another Chris, we'll just say Chris with a K, leave it at that. I know, should have known better. Anyway, but I did this podcast with him. I want to say it was the 7th episode where we basically had an argument because homeboy wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. And I really just called him out on it. And, he decided to tell me he was going to quit. No. We were having an argument, basically texting back and forth. And he's like, I don't think we should work together anymore. And I was like, cool. But the reason why I say that is because we were talking about really before the podcast, this one started, that most podcasts, at least I've seen this statistic, however they calculated, that most podcasts only make 10 episodes before whoever started it quits, right? And so we've 10x to that. Obviously, we're at the 100th episode. There's tons of podcasts out there with thousands of episodes. Look at Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah.
Or whoever. But it hasn't been easy, obviously. This requires a lot of work. And it is an all-consuming thing almost every day. There's something for the podcast, whether it's research, whether it's posting something on social media. We talk about this all the time. Ask TJ and Chris. We talk about the podcast all the time. Yeah. Anyway, but we recorded an episode one night and had a disagreement about something. And I had always gotten, since we started, working together, had this weird inkling that there was something else going on behind the scenes. But anyway, started getting all these notifications that day that my accounts were being hacked by somebody in Virginia. And, knew that it was this person that the other guy had brought in to work with us. And anyway, long story short, got the accounts back for the most part, but he did keep the original name of this podcast. And that name was, actually, I'm not even going to give it any attention because it still exists in some form. So I'm not even going to say the name. it's not a podcast anymore. It's actually just like a regurgitated news page on Instagram now. But anyway, so yeah. And then my good friend, Zach, who I met on deployment in Kenya, did this with me for over a year. And, you guys, especially if you've been listening for a while, you guys know Zach. He had his daughter and then needed to take a step back from the podcast. So now we've got the real Chris, Chris Shady. Please stand up. And then we got TJ over here after doing the live shows, which those started when Chris joined the show. We started doing the whole Rumble thing, right? People have been telling me to go to Rumble for a while. They're like, dude, you're getting butt fucked over there on Instagram and YouTube. And I was like hardcore. This was back during the Biden Reich, right? Over there in Washington, D.C., and he had Mark Zuckerberg when he was. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is still suspect as fuck, right?
Oh,
but
sure.
back when he was really towing the line for the man, right? And he sort of lifted a lot of that crap over there on social media, and then Google is still going hard in the paint on their dumb shit over there on YouTube. But anyway, so I started going over there to Rumble, and that's with the live show where a lot of you guys know us, right? So, and now, we've done 100 episodes, done a bunch of different live shows, and the show is totally transformed. It's a lot different than what I thought it would be when I first started this. It's morphed and been a couple of different things because of the different brains that have been involved in this, but, no shameless plug will ever go unsaid. We got a real merch store, so go check it out. Chris looks over there. He's got that GW. Looks like were you sucking on the top of it there?
Yeah, no, I just got back. I just got back from a little ruck march just prior to this. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So Chris is sweating, right?
I am.
So just like G-Dubs, and then we got TJ over there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So welcome to the 100th episode, guys. We didn't know what we were gonna do. Or I didn't really know what we were gonna do. Ooh. And but before we get into it, TJ prepared something for the 100th episode, and if you want, you can go and pull that up, dude.
Well, that's a beautiful thing.
This was a beautiful thing.
All right. I can't start it or anything, but hey, I've got it.
Loud as fuck.
A long time ago, in a galaxy, not really far away at all, one man created something so profound it might just change the world. The I Came with Fire podcast. Over time, he added one Bethesda, then a second, to create something so amazing people could not resist but watching every single week, over and over and over again, until the grandiose achievement came about. 100 episodes, celebrating Brandon's victory and bringing us together to make something that you people actually want to watch. Thank you for soliciting I Came with Fire and joining us for our 100th episode celebration.
That's so good, dude. I love the something that you people actually want to watch.
I know.
I love that, dude.
Here's the funniest thing about that. I'll give full disclosure. What I did is I took my mic, I sat down in front of it and just flipped open the normal voice recorder in Windows, and I ad-libbed that right off the top of my head, and I built the video around it.
Nice.
Dude, that's epic, bro. I'm not even gonna lie to you. That's pretty good.
That's a fact, brother.
Some like behind the scenes stuff for the people, since that's like kind of one of the themes that we're doing tonight, and letting people peer behind the curtain. I like how you used a bunch of stuff that was like supposed to go to the merch store that we haven't like necessarily like used yet. You're just pulling in graphics and stuff that we've like thrown in the chat. You're like, well, you know what? I'll use them for the video then.
Right.
That's great.
Dude, it was perfect.
Yeah.
That was actually perfect. I love the little drum beat in the back, too. That was pretty perfect for all of it.
Indeed, bro.
Well, dude, and listen, man, we couldn't have had anybody better voice that either. If I would have done that, it wouldn't have had the same effect at all.
Of course not.
No. What is that guy's name? The movie theater guy? What's his name? I don't remember.
I don't even know.
I can't recall.
But I mean,
what
he's
his name is.
the guy from every trailer ever.
He is.
You know?
There's like a couple people that are like known for their voices, like you know, Bruce Buffer.
He was the dude that they brought in for Tropic Thunder because they were doing all of the parody movie trailers in the beginning, and so part of the parody was that they brought that dude in to voice all. You know, he did it was the Ben Stiller action movies, Scorcher,
Oh, yeah.
Scorcher, and then like the
Yes.
final one was like Scorcher, yeah,
Right.
The
Booty
final one was
juice.
Scorcher Ice Age or whatever.
Right. Was it booty sweat? Right.
Yeah,
and
booty sweat.
Booty sweat and bust a nut bars, dude. Why?
Dude, that
why
movie-
does bust
that
a
movie was
nut bar
epic.
sound? It was. Dude, why does bust a nut bar sounds like something they'd make in Japan because they don't really understand English that well? It's bust a nut bar.
Don LaFontaine was one of them.
Don LaFontaine. That's it. That's what I was thinking of.
Can I tell a hilarious story about Tropic Thunder?
Please.
So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
was downrange. We were working with some partner force guys in Thailand, I believe. Yeah, Thailand at the time. And me and a buddy of mine had to sit on a training area overnight that we were going to be doing a simulated mission on the next day. So us and the partner force guys had to go and stay at this location just to make sure that, you know, everything stayed copacetic, so that the team that was coming in to actually do the training mission the next morning, everything was good, right? We're doing all their back end support. So we trying to figure out, like, trying to do something nice for the partner force guys. And I don't remember where the idea started, if it was like, it was one of those good idea fairy things, though, that somebody was like, well, you guys could set up a movie screen for him and bring out some of the sound equipment and play a movie for him. And we were like, okay. So that was the movie that we decided to play for him. We're like, hey, we'll play Tropic Thunder. Except, you know, we're streaming it off of some torrent site downrange in order to play it. We can't find a version in Thai, so we're playing it in English. And so these guys are just sitting there like, and there's no subtitles either. And then the torrent site would refresh like every 4 minutes or something stupid like that. And we'd have to reload it, re-queue it, find where it is,
Oh, that's
plus or minus
terrible,
30
dude.
seconds. And we made it through like 3/4 of the movie like that before the last guy finally got up and was just like, because like all the partner force dudes are just trickling out like one by one, because they were all going back over there where they had their campfire and they were drinking.
Yeah.
You know, but they're like
Fuck
totally.
this. This is
Yeah, that's
dumb.
exactly what it was one by
For
one.
real.
And finally, there was like one guy left, and he just like stood up and just looked at us, didn't say anything, and just turns around and just walks away. And me and my buddy are still standing there. And I looked over at my buddy, and I was just like, well, that was an epic failure, dude. Not even Tropic
sure.
Thunder could save that situation.
That's awesome. Here's a funny little tidbit. Now that I had to look up Don LaFontaine, he died in September of 2008.
Oh,
Yeah. I
Which
knew you'd been dead
explains
for
a
minute.
lot, man.
Oh,
But
shoot.
he had recorded more than 5,000 film trailers, hundreds of thousands of television advertisements, network promotions, and also video game trailers. That dude's voice
Yeah.
was on everything
wow.
for
You could do it.
decades.
You really could.
Yeah.
Sounds like
the
there's a job
position is
opening, TJ.
now, yes, it is
Yeah.
now open.
Why not, dude? For real.
Yeah, and he's also the one who's famous for the "In a World" thing.
Right.
So that was like his catch. In a world.
See?
There it
Oh,
is,
also,
dude.
rest in peace, Val Kilmer.
I
For
know.
real.
Doc
Hashtag,
Holliday,
yep.
dude.
Yep.
The
I
Iceman.
know, man.
Ah.
Yeah.
Jim Morrison. Everybody forgets
Jim
he did Jim Morrison on the Doors,
yeah.
man. He actually
Yeah, no,
he
yeah.
sang
Heat.
a bunch of the Doors songs. He did a whole demo that way and actually sang extremely well. Sounded just like Jim Morrison.
Wow.
I didn't know they did that.
Yep,
Yeah, I
he
did
actually
Heat.
was part of a cover band that did Doors covers.
No
That's
joke.
cool. I wonder if so the remaining members of the Doors actually kept doing music as Riders on the Storm. Do you know if he ever did like frontman stuff for them?
That would have been a cool freaking thing.
that'd be
I
dope.
don't know, man, but that would make a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if he
Like,
did.
Ray Manzarek, the pipe organist, he was a really kind of rare gem of that band.
Yeah, Robbie.
Now, I know
Krieger.
one of the reasons that they had him play, Iceman, the Admiral, the way that they
Mm-hmm.
did is he really was in poor health when they were trying to make that film. So that was like
Yeah.
the bulk of the filming they could get out of him.
Right.
So it was
right.
really kind of a sad thing, yeah.
For
It was
sure.
cool to see him in it, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
You know?
and I thought they gave him like a very, even though it was a cameo role and you like realized that it was a cameo role, it was a very meaningful cameo that moved the story.
Yeah,
so
right.
they still
They
put him
hugged.
like central to the story. Yeah, him and Maverick make up, that whole thing. I love that film. I thought the Top Gun Maverick was probably one of the better sequels that I've ever seen, as far
It's
as like,
honestly-
sequel films go.
it's honestly too bad we don't have our soundboard, because now would be the perfect time.
I know.
For the Top Gun.
Dude.
The Top Gun bell, dude.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I
There's
don't
no way to
know.
inject that in here, is there?
Well, we could add it in there at some point, or it
I've
could
never
be
played
right
with
now.
Riverside.
Yeah.
The post.
No, it has a media board in here. Just haven't loaded anything in it like that. But
Oh, nice.
so I was thinking about this for a while. I was like, 100 episodes, probably should do something big for it. I don't know if you could call this big, given that it's just another podcast episode. But the achievement, I guess, for me is big, having 100 episodes, given now that we know after 10 episodes, the majority of podcasts quit. And even I actually, Brett, I won't say who it was. I got a pretty good compliment the other day. I was explaining about this, and then also that we had like our merch store now, and they're like, dude, like, I just want to tell you, man, like, that's actually really big achievement. It's really hard, blah, blah, blah. Most podcasts quit. He's like, I got buddies that have been doing this for like 5 years, and they still only got like 41 followers, blah, blah, blah. He's like, and they still do it. And he's like, I know. And dude, like, by no means, like, are we like a big podcast at all? We're still very, very small given like some of the other platforms, but we have some amazing fans, people that are super loyal.
Yeah.
I think that's the coolest thing to me, is that there are people that come back, especially every Friday and now Wednesday, for the both of the live shows, and then folks that hit us up on social media every single day. There are those of you who do message me every single day on social media, and then the people that interact with us on the Discord server as well is awesome. And quite honestly, that's sort of been one of the bigger, broader lessons on doing this with me, for me, is that almost everybody I've met, everybody I've met doing the podcast has basically been virtual. There's been very few people who I've had on the podcast who I have actually met like in real life. And just, obviously Chris and I now have hung out together in person. You came down twice now, and then, but TJ, like, you and I have never met. Chris and you have never met,
Very
right?
true.
Yep.
And then, longtime fan, listener, super great friend, Jody, got the opportunity to meet him in Arizona last year. So,
sweet.
it's just very rare that, but there's been so many awesome people. And so that's the best thing about this, is like realizing and having to realize, or coming to the realization that there's so many people out there that sort of think the same way, or like have the same interests. And that even if you're not, I think a lot of people hope that they're going to take off and get really big really fast. It's probably like everybody's hope. And I had to like check myself, right? Expectation management as far as what the podcast was going to be, and like growth rate. And, I'll admit, like, full disclosure, right, I still get pretty frustrated sometimes with like just the growth rate. But knowing and getting to meet and know all these people out there and see just how many awesome folks there are out there, not just Americans either, which is cool. Canadians, Australians.
Yeah, a lot
other
of
people.
Canadians listen. That always cracks me up, because I dunk on Canada pretty hard, pretty consistently, and they
Dude,
keep
yeah.
coming back.
Well, somebody the other day
love
on the
you guys.
live show was like, well, this is for Chris. And they did you see the comment on the show? The one we
Yeah,
did? Yeah,
I did.
they were like, oh, well, you know what you can thank Canada for? Rumble.
Yeah.
Stupid bitch. Like, yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah. No, they didn't call you a stupid bitch, obviously. There's actually somebody who listens pretty often, and they live in Alberta. I'm pretty sure they want to become the 51st state.
That's
Speaking
right.
of Canada, not to get too political on our show here, but did you see that the Senate passed the bill to halt the tariffs on Canada?
I did.
Rand
and
Paul was one of the ones
Lisa
who
Murkowski,
voted.
Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, and it
course,
just
dude.
goes to
Mitch
show
the
you
glitch.
they're going to do everything they can to obstruct this man's presidency at every turn. So
Yep. It's just crazy too, because this is honestly something that we've talked about a lot as well, is that just because we have the majority doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And here it is, dude, right? Like,
Well,
you got
never
people
get
like
to
that.
you never get to stop fighting. And unfortunately, I think the Wisconsin Supreme Court election that we just came through is a
dude.
perfect example of that. Wisconsinites came out and they voted for voter ID, which I was very proud to see.
Which is good.
Great common sense law. Thank you, Wisconsin. But those same people that voted for that then also turned around and decided to keep a liberal bent on the Supreme Court. And to me, that lesson was, exactly what we say here all the time, Brandon. It's like, citizen, you don't get to be a passive citizen. It requires duty. And we also keep beating the drum of, if MAGA is going to be a movement, it has to survive without Donald Trump. And I think we just saw a very strong indication that we've got a lot of work to do to pick up the flag and move forward, because this is going to be Donald Trump's last term. He's not going to be president again. Stop joking about it. It's not funny. And we've got 3 years to figure out what the future of this movement is going to be, to come up with exactly what America First means, which is something, hint, hint, nod, nod, wink, wink, that we're working on, so that we have an actual document that we can point to, a stake in the ground, as it were, and then to figure out who the leader of the party is going to be moving forward. And that's really going to be all on us. So for all the people that got a big boost in their channel following, you know, because of the election season or because of Donald Trump, like, hey, he's going away, and that always creates a power vacuum of voices like coming to the top. And you know, like, I'm just going to go ahead and say it here. You know, it's one of our dreams. I don't want to use the word dream, but it's one of our goals to be a leader in that category of voices moving forward, of saying, hey, exactly what is America First supposed to be, and how are we going to maintain a movement of active citizenship and being in charge of your country. I'm excited to be a part of that, and I see nothing but growth opportunity in our future so that we can be a part of that movement. It's going to be sweet.
Yeah, we certainly need to be a heavy voice for the communities to actually pull together and take care of stuff like this. And this Wisconsin election is a perfect example. I was actually, by coincidence, I had something goofy in my headset, and I can't even remember what it was. Something turned on, and I just decided not to turn it off last night for a few moments, and it was kicking off like an active news feed. And they had said that there was a possibility they were going to call that election, and I went ahead and I left it rolling. And I heard when they called it, and I was obviously very disappointed, and reason being is exactly what we've discussed on the show many times, and what I've been trying to push forward to everybody is this active role we need to take in small elections and local elections. The fact that it wasn't just that there was so much support for the liberal candidate, it's the fact that in that election and then another election that where a group of conservative representatives were elected, they said that in both those elections there was lower voter turnout than expected, and that freaking infuriated me, because that means everybody's already going back to sleep, man, all over again.
Dude, this is
we got Trump in, so now we can all just be complacent again.
Yeah, and you know, again, not to get like too bogged down on this before like jumping in, but like no, you're fine. It's just, this is exactly the problem, man. Like, conservatives routinely do stupid crap like this because we just want to be left alone group. And you can't be that way. Like, this is not the time to be complacent. You have to be actively paying attention and proactive, and get out there and just be as aggressive as the liberals have no problem being, right? And when I say liberal too, like, I need to keep quantifying that. I don't mean like your traditional liberal. I mean the modern American left, which does not represent the classical ideal of liberalism at all anymore, right? Yeah. And the last thing I'll say too, I think there's actually going to be a pretty big exodus of people moving away from the phrase MAGA after Trump is gone. And I think a lot of people it's going to become like taboo to say, and they're going to try to reframe it as America First and start calling it that, because I think a lot of people want to get, I actually think there's probably a lot of people that want to get away from like the Trump era of politics, but know that was the better option this time, you know? And so that's why, you know, to your credit, Chris, saying like we're trying to define what like America First means, I do think that there's so many people out there that have no idea what it means. You know, they see anything and everything as far as foreign aid, the United States, you know, having its footprint in the world when it comes to global trade or warfare or whatever. Anything that isn't inside our borders is automatically not America First, you know, and understand like what that means. And when we say America First, it can't mean America only, you know. And so that is so important, because how can you have a set of values and a movement if you can't define what that movement means, you know? And I think the right, like right now, like, yeah, we got a victory in the presidential election, but this is a a group of people moving in 500 different directions at the same time. And it's because, dude, again, like, just not good at organizing and not good at having the same message. And it is what it is. And this is a traditional tenet of the conservative half of this country, is just not good at defining what they, we have like, oh yeah, the things we're trying to conserve and like define these things, but like we really aren't the traditional right anymore. So what does this mean? And so that's what one of our goals is to try to like parse that out and push out a product and say like, this is what we think this means, because there needs to be more people in this space actually defining what that means, and not just yelling and say everything that's wrong with this country is because of the Jews. Like, you people are idiots. I'll tell you that much. Like, there can be problems with the United States' relationship with Israel and the Israeli government and things like AIPAC or whatever, and it not be everything is the Jews, right? Like, these are different things. So you have to have and learn how to have concurrent thoughts in your head and make discernible decisions, or positive, or not positive, but intelligent, discernible decisions about what's actually going on, and not cling to just whatever the current zeitgeist is that week on social media. So anyway, yeah, man. And so this could easily, evolve into a live fire or a check fire real quick here. Just we're just three really passionate dudes who have strong opinions, and that's probably one of the reasons why, when I first started this podcast, I did want to talk about things like this, but I also wanted to be the guy that talked about aliens and ghosts and other weird, goofy shit. And that still happens, but it definitely doesn't happen on the frequency that I wish it would. And one of the things that I learned doing this podcast is most of that group, like the group that's into the paranormal and the group that's into like disclosure and UAP and all that stuff, are very liberal people. And there's not a lot. And so like, hats off, or, tip of the hat to folks like 305 Paranormal or MP Paranormal, our buddies who do come on the podcast and talk spooky crap with us from time to time. And but anyway, speaking of that, so
do it.
When we talked about what we were going to do tonight, I figured, why not try to parse in all of the tenets and elements that make this podcast what it is, and just give you guys a show that's really just kind of a free for all, but is staying true to what this show has become. And so Chris and TJ have a few things I know that they've either prepared or ready to talk about, and then I do too. And you know me, man, I like the spooky stuff. And one thing that I've wanted to do on this show is do a deep dive on this topic. I've touched on it on the surface, but this is honestly one of the more spooky ones that I have been a fan of for a long time, this topic. And that topic is black-eyed kids.
Oh,
and I'm not sure, are either of you guys
that one?
Mm-hmm. Are you, just like real fast, are either, I know, well, Chris, obviously you are, but TJ, are you familiar with the black-eyed kid story theory? Yeah? Where did you hear about it?
Well, honestly, from the weird movement it had into horror movies for a little while, where they were showing the black-eyed kids out in the forest, and they always had kind of like the dark veins in the face and just that hollowness. So I started catching some of the behind-the-scenes stuff on some of that, which is something goofy I was into for a while. I was listening to some of like directors and stuff like that talk about movies, and I started hearing them talking about some of the lore that led up to that, and found out that this was a phenomena that has been witnessed in so many different countries, but a lot of the collaboration of it is very similar. It's kind of like, people with biblical stories, a lot of things.
Or Bigfoot.
Do seem to, exactly, a lot of things seem to add up across the boards of many, many different places, speaking different languages with different cultures and customs. But they, and of course, go by all different names, but they all kind of land on a very similar target, which is, enough to make you think, maybe.
Yeah, Native Americans have like black-eyed children stories as well, which is interesting. Chris, what did you hear about them though? First, was it
when
me,
did I
or was it
first
something?
hear about them? So I think I first. I can't remember like a time where it's like I was first introduced to it, like I can like put a pin in it, but I do know that after joining this podcast and then working with you for the first few weeks and learning like just how much you were into the paranormal, you started introducing me to concepts, and I was like, okay, so I actually have a page in one of my notebooks around here of things to go look up and rabbit holes to run down, and that one was on
Weird
the
shit
list.
to learn.
Yeah, well, basically, yeah. Hey, like if you're gonna hang out with this guy, better know about this. You know what I'm saying? Like one of those things. And so probably Christmas block leave 2020 2023 into 2024, I think, is when we first met, wasn't it? Or was it the next year? Was it Christmas block leave 2024? I think it was 2023.
Man, it would have had to have been
2024.
2020. Well, when we first met, it may have been 2023.
Yeah, because it was a while before we started working together. But
it was.
But it was in like those, like probably that 6-month period before we started working together that I started running down a lot of this and listened to a lot of like paranormal podcasts, and then started going down the rabbit hole, the Reddits, the subreddits, and I was just like, I'm not gonna lie, I think if we go back through the text streams, I'm sure you can find it. But I remember telling you just like randomly at one point one day, I was like, dude, I think black-eyed kids might be one of the scariest, spookiest paranormal phenomenon that exists. There's that one, and there's the woman in white, and like those two stories kind of creep me out more than most of the others. And I think it has to do with the idea of pure evil meeting total innocence. And it's because of that like synthesis of those two things on top of each other that is just very unnerving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the most interesting thing to me, I think, about them is that they seem to have their fingers in a couple different genres, I guess, of the supernatural, right? Because you learn about some of these encounters people have with them, and you can say, well, they seem to maybe be time travelers, because more often than not, they're dressed out of the time period, right? Yeah. They're dressed almost like 19th century, like think like old Western or like early 20th century, 1920s, 1930s sort of dress. And then they use language and they speak in a way that sounds old as well. Like there's a pretty popular story of black-eyed kids. And they come in, they knock on somebody's door and they ask to use their telegram, which hasn't been around for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
So there's that element too. There's another element here as well of them being involved with the Men in Black. And I've seen this as well, where they are at the door, they try to come in, they, get refused a couple different times, and then a black car rolls up. And then there's men in black suits driving the car, and then they get in and drive away. There's the genre of like the trickster spirit, right? They try to use and play on your emotions to get into the door, right? Then they also seem to have some sort of element of, causing or inflicting some sort of pain or emotional damage or even illness. So there's all these really, really weird ideas about them. And then too, like mind control, which seems to be a big one, because most people that have encounters with them, they talked about having these encounters with them, they say that they didn't realize what was going on until it was either too late or their sense of danger sort of overrode whatever sort of mind control was happening with them. Which is really spooky. And Chris, before I start going into the stories, it looked like you had something to say. I want to give you the opportunity real quick.
I was just pissed that TJ is dropping creepy black-eyed kid photos in the team chat while we're talking about this, because I got to go in there and wipe it off my phone. Dude, I'm telling you, like this story.
That's supposed to be an authentic photo. That's why I flipped it at you guys.
Yeah. No, these stories creep me out. And
dude, you should pull it up on the screen. Pull it up on the screen.
I got it ready already, brother.
Yeah.
You know me.
Well, for our video listeners, right? Black-eyed kids are exactly what they sound like. They are kids. They seem to be, of the maybe like 6 to 12-year-old. Some of them seem a little bit older, but a lot of the stories you'll find, they're like adolescent, prepubescent kids. And, I don't know if that's because of whoever they work for or whatever, to use the phrase work for, knows that you're going to trust potentially a kid knocking on your door at night saying they're in trouble or wanting in or whatever, because of everybody's inherent desire to help out children, right? So you can yank that down, buddy. And so what I'm going to do, be gone, demon. Exactly. So I'm going to read you guys the original story. This is like, when I say original, this is sort of where the lore online came from. This is the original story online where it got, super popular and into the social sphere. And there's a conversation, too, to be had here about the idea of creepypasta, all of these stories becoming interwoven, and then all this lore. And then, too, right, like the idea of Slender Man.
Right.
That sort of like this social contagion, like or a tulpa, which is a paranormal word.
The stairs deep in the woods.
The stairs deep in the woods, yeah. And a tulpa being this entity or whatever you want to call it that people think about and give so much energy to that energy makes it real because so many people believe in it, right? Yes. So that's another idea of like what could the black-eyed kids be is a tulpa, which is where the idea behind Slender Man being real. And there was actually murders, I think, Chris, in Wisconsin.
I don't know
girls.
Wisconsin, but yeah,
you could look it up, TJ, to give the actual. If you wouldn't mind, TJ, just check out where those murders took place. But the Slender Man murders, those girls said, I'm pretty sure they lured another girl out to the woods and then stabbed her. And they said they did it for Slender Man. Did you find it, TJ?
Got it right here. It was in Waukesha, Wisconsin, United States.
It was in Waukesha.
E. Weir and Morgan E. Geeser.
Yeah. They lured a girl out to the woods, right?
They lured their friend Peyton Lautner into a wooded area of a local park, stabbed her 19 times to appease the fictional supernatural character Slender Man, and prove that he was real. Lautner survived the attack.
That's right.
After being founded by a cyclist, later stating the attack inspired her to pursue a career in medicine.
Whatever, I guess.
That just speaks so much to spiritual energy. When it requires a sacrifice to appease something and then prove it real, and then based on what you were saying earlier, Brandon, before you launch into the deep dive of it, in speaking about like kind of the spiritual connection to some of this stuff, I always found it very interesting too that when it comes to the black-eyed kids, there's always this theme of they're always asking to get in. Right, they never force their way in, which is also something that speaks to like spiritual law
Vampires.
for anybody that gets into demonology and the occult. But there is always like demons can't just like barge into your life. There has to be an invitation. You have to invite them in and bring them in. And that's another thing about this story that's always just unnerved me is that it's so up front with the Lord that they're knocking on the door and then please let us in. Can we use? And then they get increasingly upset when you deny them. If you listen through some of these stories, right? And then, it's just, dude, there's a lot going on here.
The funny, I guess not really funny, but creepy thing about that particular story is number one, it's coming up on its 11th anniversary. It actually happened on the 31st of May of 2014. Oh, but the primary person who was involved in it, Geiser, I guess, displayed no empathy or concern for having stabbed the other girl at all. And then the other one felt some guilt for stabbing her, but they both claimed in their interviews that it was absolutely necessary. And they were both found not guilty.
Really?
Due to psychological complications, mental diseases, and defect, and they were committed to mental institutions instead of charged with criminal offenses.
Wow, that's wild, dude.
Yeah.
Honestly, can't
Absolutely
believe.
Insane.
I can't believe that happened.
That would be super hard though to find a jury that would be willing to convict young ladies. I mean, show me the people that is going to look at a young woman and then just, it's like, oh, yep, throw her in jail. That speaks to something about our society as well too, though.
For real. But the Weir, the one who actually felt some remorse, was already released back in 2021 to live with her father from a mental institution, and the one who showed no remorse is scheduled to be released this year from her mental keepings, whatever asylum she's in or whatever. Arkham.
Hey.
Arkham. No joke.
I'm trying to find, I want to see if this is the one.
I don't want to throw the full disclosure.
But that does while
Brandon's
still looking for that though, that does comport very closely with the psychological profile of the fictional character Harley Quinn. That is so emotionally attached to the Joker that she's willing to do anything without, with the zero impulse control and no empathy whatsoever. So that's very interesting.
Okay, so the original story for this, when I say original, like I said, guys, this is where like it first hit the internet. What's that?
Is it Harold?
No.
Oh.
So this man's name is Brian Bethel. He was a journalist, and the original encounter he had with him was in 1996 in Abilene, Texas. Okay, so I'm just going to read this to you. Let's see. Brian Bethel was a seasoned journalist. The flicker of his desk lamp created an ambiance of both warmth and mystery in his small office. It was 1996 in Abilene, Texas. An uncanny quiet wrapped the night in its eerie stillness, the kind that makes you feel as if you are being watched. Brian leaned back, massaged his temples, his eyes skimmed over the day's notes. He just finished writing an article and felt the pull of the night air, craving a drive to clear his mind. He grabbed his jacket and keys and left the soft hum of his computer behind. He parked outside of an old communications building. He took a moment to savor the quiet. The dim light of the nearby flickering marquee sign cast eerie shadows. An otherworldly atmosphere saturated the night. He jumped, chills running along his spine, when a sudden tapping on the window stirred him from his thoughts. Two boys around the age of 10 stood beside his car. Their presence was unsettling. They wore outdated clothes. Their heads were slightly bowed. Brian rolled down his window halfway, curious but cautious. "Can we get a ride?" the platinum-haired boy asked. His voice was steady but devoid of inflection, like a rehearsed line. Brian's instinct screamed, "Be afraid, be very afraid." But when he felt an unexplicable pull towards them, "Where are you heading?" "Our mother forgot us at home. We need to see the movie," the other boy said, a mirrored image of his mate, his voice just as flat. Brian glanced at the marquee. Last showings were halfway done. "It's too late for a movie, kid. Where do you live?" "Just let us in. We won't take long," the first boy insisted. His tone had grown forceful as he repeated, "Just let us in." A chill crawled along Brian's spine. Something about their demeanor felt wrong. It wasn't just their monotonous voices or odd persistence. Then, as if his instincts flipped a switch, he noticed their eyes. Black, like endless voids, absorbed the faint flickering marquee light, but reflected nothing back. Brian's heart pounded. He gripped the steering wheel. Every fiber of his being shouted to get away. "No, you need to go home," he said, voice shaky. "Let us in," the boys said in unison. Their pitch increased. Their eyes bored into him with chilling intensity. In a panic, Brian slammed the car into reverse. Tires screeched as he sped away. He glanced in the rearview mirror and expected to see the boys receding into the distance, but instead they were gone, as if they'd never existed. So actually, I've read a couple different versions of this story, and if you guys like creepy podcasts, I recommend listening to the Astonishing Legends podcast. They did a really good cover of Black Eyed Kids as well. And the story that they recount is a little different. So I'll give you guys the story here. That Brian was, again, in a parking lot in the evening, and he was there to pay his internet bill, and he was going to pay it with a check and was writing a check in his car when he heard the knock on his window and looked up to see the kids. And they were actually, the movie that they were trying to see was a re-airing of Mortal Kombat. And everything else pretty much is the same, with them insisting on being let into the car. But the one thing that he did say was different in the Astonishing Legends episode was the kid told Brian that he didn't have a gun, which is a really, really weird thing to say.
It's an odd thing to say.
Yeah, and ties into the sort of odd behavior of the Black Eyed Kids. Like, why would you, like, if you were stranded somewhere and you approached a stranger in a parking lot, you're like, you just need to go a couple blocks down the road or maybe a couple miles down the road to a gas station. Would you say, "Hey, can I get a ride? I don't have a gun"? Like, that would just make you, if somebody said that to me, like, I'd be like, that's a really freaking weird thing to say, Right. And so that he said was what really triggered him to, like, sort of snap out of this daze that they had sort of placed him in. And the other thing that they'd mentioned in the Astonishing Legends episode is that he'd caught himself when that happened about the gun, that his hand was actually reaching for the lock on his door. Like he was going to unlock it subconsciously, unlock the door for them. And that whole scenario of we don't have a gun, realizing his hand was like basically reaching for the lock without him doing it, was what scared the shit out of him and made him realize that their eyes were black. And then that whole thing, the throwing the car in reverse, saying in an interview, I guess, saying, or writing his story online, saying he was, so thankful that he didn't hit anybody, because he sort of realized as he was throwing the car in reverse that he was hauling ass in reverse in the middle of a parking lot and didn't bother to look in the rearview mirror. But, basically those are the differences in the story. But yeah, that's sort of the origin story for black-eyed kids entering the internet sphere, which is pretty creepy.
Well, the one that I had heard, and the reason that I brought up Harold was actually it's much older, and it's an Appalachian story. And it was from a journal that was found to have been dated back in the early 1950s from a kid who was just named Harold.
Do you have it?
Said when it was Harold, I do. It's short.
Yeah, read it, dude.
But that's what makes it fun, and this is going to make it even more fun. Ooh.
I will say this. I always say, hey, if you're not a video listener of the episodes, you should be.
That's right. So, of course, according to the story in Appalachia, Harold was walking home one afternoon when he came across another boy that was leaning against a fence, as if he was waiting for his parents or someone else. The teenager attempted to speak to him, but he received no response. He was about to walk off and go on with his journey when the strange boy suddenly stated to Harold, "I want to go to your house. You're going to take me to your house." It was then that Harold noticed the blackness of the boy's eyes. There was no white in them, just solid black. Harold began to contemplate turning and running home as fast as he could when something even stranger and more chilling happened. The boy blurted out, "Now don't you run away from me. You're going to walk me up to your house now." Harold turned and ran away, faster than his legs had ever carried him before. He later recalled to his parents that he did so and wrote it in his journal. And he also heard a scream come from behind him that he likened to the sound of a bobcat. Interestingly, his parents believed their son's account so much that his father was said to have grabbed his gun and went out looking for the menacing boy, who demanded that his son take him to their family home. His mother apparently thought her son had an encounter with the devil himself and stated she would take him to see a local priest. So that is the fun of that particular account in Appalachia from the early 1950s.
If my son said a story like that to me, I wouldn't have any reason not to believe him.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, like, my wife and I have had conversations like this before. Like, what are we gonna do if one of the kids says something creepy, and it's messing with them, like at night or whatever? And I've always said, like, I mean, I have no reason not to believe them. What do they have to gain from saying something like that? And then too, like, you can tell when you have your, you get to know your kids when they're saying something that just isn't true, and they're just saying it because maybe they're repeating it and they heard it or whatever. Kids do crap like that all the time. Like my son likes to say, he's like, he went and peed on the floor for what? Because he's 3, but he didn't do it. He just like likes to say he did it, which is ridiculous. But he's 3, So like, but you could tell. Right, when your kids are BSing you, and you can also see what real fear looks like, So I agree. Yeah, that's cool. I'd not heard that story, TJ. This was that story I read is like the black-eyed kids' first, on the internet, somebody saying something.
Yeah,
about
I'd seen that come around the 96 side of it all for kind of where the internet lore and the quick upquaking of it came from, for sure, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I guess another thing that's tagged along with the journal, underneath the journal notes on this is 10 facts about black-eyed kids, which I think is kind of fun here. So black-eyed kids will look like normal human children, usually between the ages of 6 and 16, but with pale skin and completely black eyes. People who have been in close proximity to black-eyed kids usually report a feeling of unease and something weird that washes over them. While nothing about the children's appearance aside from their eyes usually frightens them, they still report feeling anxiety, terror, or some form of paralysis in their presence. Some people have also reported seeing black-eyed kids that have talons for feet or other strange demonic attributes when they take a closer look at their limbs, but most sightings are of seemingly normal children. Black-eyed kids are also commonly described as wearing dated clothing or dressing in a manner that is not typical of a child of this era or of their age. Black-eyed children always ask for something, whether it be a ride, entrance into a home, entrance into a business, something that will bring them in close quarters with you. They ask for rides in your vehicle or to use a phone, for instance. There are no reported stories of what happens if you let a black-eyed kid into your vehicle or home. All stories come from people whose eerie feelings made them flee from these children. The earliest sightings on the internet of black-eyed kids, of course, came from Brian Bethel in 1996. The story has been added to internet creepypasta lore, but to this day, Bethel insists the incident was real and happened the way he reported, and in 2014 a British paper reported that sightings of black-eyed kids around the world had been rising. Theories about black-eyed kids are that they are vampires, aliens, or possibly of demonic origin.
Well, they're almost certainly not children, right? And
Yeah.
and I say that not to be dumb or to oversimplify it, but because of the way they act, right? Which again is one of those other things that I was talking about, where the appearance of the thing and then the way that it acts, it's like total evil, but on top of something that looks so innocent, because then they start becoming increasingly demanding that you're going to do a thing. And then also, like you spatted it out there while you were doing your facts, like the thing that makes these stories so creepy is you don't know what happens if you capitulate, which then it just leaves you with that eternal question, which is one of the things that, like, this is what internet lore is made of, right? It's like, what do they want? Nobody knows.
Well, the funny thing to me is we give so much, I think, leverage to the paranormal and, you know, evil, as if they are, you know, incredibly intelligent, all-knowing, omniscient beings, like this evil ghosts, like things like that. Like, we automatically assume that, like, they know everything or know what they're doing, right? There's just like this sort of like understood aspect of that, which the black kids are sort of a departure. Black kids black kids are as smart as white kids.
Oh,
no. Yeah, Joe Biden. No, but anyway, the black-eyed kid thing is sort of a departure from that. Because, like, you'd think, right? Like, if you are this evil entity on the other side of the veil and your entire goal is to exact some sort of evil on people, and people are your business, that you could pay attention enough to know that the outfit you've got on doesn't quite match what everybody else around you is wearing. So, like, you know, and then the way you speak is not like, no one in their right. If somebody came up to your house today, some little kid, and asked to come in and use the telegram, you would probably think they just somehow magically made a mistake and said telegram instead of telephone, right? So some of the things that they say, they don't match, like you said, the era in which you're encountering them. So it's kind of funny. It's like, well, what is going on the other side of the plane where you guys just can't get it right? Like, you can't appear, you know, close enough to human that you guys are just giving yourselves away. Like, you would think that if you are this ultimate evil being and you're a demon and you're trying to, like, come into somebody's life and ruin it, that, like, you would appear to be the most, you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, you would enticing thing and convincing thing that you could be to get in, and not out of place and not use old dated jargon. So it's kind of funny. It's like, what's up with that? Why are you guys dressed out of date? Why are you guys speaking in old dated jargon? What's going on? You know, so is it like this element that people assign to tricksters where they say that, well, they can't be too convincing because then it's not fair? Right. So there's almost like which is creepy too when you think about it. It's almost like a hunt or a game in that way, which is kind of spooky to think about it that way. But, like, what do you think? Like, why can they just, like, not get it right? Or is there the rules, so to speak, where they have to abide by these strange things that, you know, like, you know, they can't be too convincing, right?
Well, I have something really interesting on that right up top, and I'm going to take it back to the demonology side of things. In that, you know, one of the ways, and Brandon, you hit the nail on the head. Like, demons are not all knowing spiritual entities. Like, you know, their father Satan is not omnipotent and omniscient like God our Father is, right? And so one of the things that's very interesting in Scripture, whenever, like, demons speak, they can tell you lots of very interesting things, things that other people wouldn't necessarily know, but it's almost always it is nearly always in the Bible things that are of the past tense. Like, they have a vast network and they can communicate quickly. They can tell you things that you don't think anybody else would know because you've done them in secret, but other spirits can know those things, but they're always in the past tense. Versus when you see angelic beings come down and they're giving messages from the Lord, you know, Gabriel being a great example. The angels almost always deliver messages about things that are of yet to come, because only the Lord can know about things that are in the future. So Gabriel tells Mary about the upcoming birth of Jesus. An angel of the Lord appears to Joshua and tells him about the upcoming battle of Jericho and how the children of Israel are to work if they're going to win. The burning bush appears to Moses and gives him a task and tells him of his upcoming meeting with Pharaoh and how that's going to go down. So it's very interesting in the Bible, like when you look at those two things. I know that a lot of theologians will tell you like it's based on the information, not based on, but you can tell basically if they're of the light or of the dark, things that spirits can know, because the one side is coming from God who can know the future, while the other side is coming from the devil who can know secret things, but he can only know of things that have happened, can't know of things that are of yet to come. So it's just, so it's like when I see to the black-eyed kid phenomenon specifically, when you talk about it, it's like, why are they always dated? Why are they, well, it's because, like, if you do draw the line to them, being demonic in nature, then they can only know of things of the past, and it's like they can make themselves look as alluring as possible, like right up to that point. But there's always something that's going to be just off, and they probably could get the date of the clothes right. So it's like, I'm not saying, gotcha, see, they're demons, but I just found that to be an interesting point.
Yeah, I was going to say
sure.
too, like what you were saying is that like anything that I've ever seen or learned about demons is that they can know what's going on and do know what's going on in the present. You know what I mean? So they could get the clothing right, they could get the lingo right, because they, existing in the moment, they just can't know the future. So I mean, I could see it being that, demonic. I mean, I definitely wouldn't take that off the table. I think that's probably one of the more logical explanations, but I do wonder like why that is, because demons can know what's going on in the present and what's going on, like you said, they can know secrets, right? Which means somebody's holding that secret, which is of the present, And so are there rules? Go ahead, TJ. I know you got something to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw the other direction on this, man. As you talked about some potential encounters with the Men in Black, also coinciding with them, and the fact that a lot of people refer to them potentially being alien. That there are some theories floating around about aliens that, because of the way obviously there's so much of a great distance in travel and the way that time works, potentially through black holes and everything else. That some of the things that aliens trying to observe our culture may see it at points before they destined to try to travel here that are completely different than the points of their arrival.
Interesting.
So they're working with outdated material essentially once they arrive.
Dude,
so
they just gave me a crazy thought that like if they are in fact like some sort of like alien, right? Then if they are only seeing Earth at this small time period, let's just like say like 1850 to like 1920, then you should be able to do the math on relativity and figure out like how far away they are. Because if you understand, I guess, like how fast light travels and however many light years or light minutes or whatever you'd have to go away to see Earth as if it was 1920 or 1850, then you could sort of say like, well, what distance they're traveling from or however they're traveling. I don't know. Just like, because the whole idea, you could go 16 million years away and you could turn around. If you could like look at Earth, right? If the physics worked that way, that you would see the dinosaurs, right? So there's that's an interesting idea, TJ. Go ahead, Chris.
I wish we could reverse engineer that and figure out like what time and space that they're coming from. But
that's what I'm saying.
According to the Eric Weinstein video you sent us the other day, we all astrophysics study peaked out in like the late 1960s, early 1970s. So
yeah, in his mind, I've heard him talk about that a lot. Is the idea of string theory and quantum mechanics is taken over and ruined and ousted a lot of innovative thought in the physics world over there. But yeah, no, I like that idea, TJ. That's an interesting one. There's another story I talk about pretty often, and I've mentioned this book a few times. It's called Siren Call of Hungry Ghosts. And basically the short and condensed version, because it doesn't really have anything to do with Black Eyed Kids, but it does tie in with this, is this guy ends up going to this channeler, and there's like a whole group of people that meet up like every Friday in this apartment in Canada, and they all go and meet this channeler, and supposedly she's channeling all of their like people they've known in past lives and things like that, and spirit guides. And his spirit guide, or the person that comes through, is a woman, and this is like an old lover of his. And this is, he wrote this book. It's not it's not fiction. It's like a non-fiction. You know, what happened to him in real life, and it's an old lover of his, and he basically falls in love with this spirit. This channeler is coming through to him, and it like ruins his relationship. And he starts realizing, just like a lot of other people through the course of these stories that their spirit guides or whatever are telling them, that some things are accurate, most things are accurate, or they're just slightly off, where the information is like, oh, that's just wrong enough to where it's believable, but it's not accurate. And this isn't like the 1980s, right? Like before the internet, you can't just like Google, you know, like example, like one of the stories is this spirit talking to him gave him a story of a town they lived in Greece during this time period, and how they used to go down to the docks or the specific like, you know, cliffside and watch the boats together or whatever, you know, and it sounds believable. There's all this, there's all this density to the story that sorts of makes it believable. And he ends up running down a lot of the information, and somebody else does too, of this information that they're given about them being in the RAF, the Royal Air Force, during World War II. And he like actually runs through and checks all this information, and he like reaches out to somebody in England, this historical society, to find all this info, and learns that like 90% of it is correct, but the other parts of it are just super wrong, and some of it is like outright lies. And so they start questioning these spirits as they're coming through the channeler, like, why are you lying? And the spirit starts blaming them, you know. And the whole conclusion he sort of comes to is that there are a set of rules that they can't give you 100% fact, because then it would be completely believable and verifiable, that in the spirit of fairness, so to speak, they have to lie to you, because then it isn't fair, because then there's no even playing ground, right? Like, what do you guys think about that? Like, is there anything, you guys know better than me, is there anything biblical to that? The rules, so to speak?
I haven't ever heard of anything along those lines of like there being kind of rules of, the behavior of demons or dark entities or angels or anything else to where they have to kind of coax it. I mean, obviously the reason we as people were given free will was so that we would have to choose God, because God didn't want to force us like, all other beings to just be pre-programmed with, with our instincts and work off of that and, just go, okay, well, we all worship God. We worship God. That's what we do. And he wanted us to choose him. He wanted us to come back to him. He also wanted us to treat each other with dignity and respect, make moral decisions, and, follow a pattern of righteousness throughout our lives so that we could prove during this life that we deserve to be seated at his side. And that, I don't know outside of that of any other kind of relationships like that to take place to where there'd be kind of rules of engagement, so to speak, in that. But that's a crazy cool theory for sure.
I would say the only thing, and this is total speculation on what I understand of spiritual right and spiritual warfare, and that is like God. I'm going to say God cannot lie, but don't mistake that for saying like, say he's not all powerful. No, it's not that. It is God is all truth. Like if God says a thing, it is true. If it's not a thing that's true now, by virtue of him saying it, it will be true in the moment that he says it. Yeah. So it's like, on the flip side of that, like Satan is the father of all lies. And he even lies to himself back when he said, it's like, I will ascend on the throne and I will be like God. And so, if you go back and read the Old Testament, read about, a third of the angels following Satan because he was such an adept liar and coming to earth. If he is the father of lies, I'm saying this would make sense to me that demons can only lie. Right? Mm-hmm. Because it is the opposite of the angelic. It is the opposite of God. And like Satan, who is the father of lies and can only lie and deceive, demons can only lie and deceive. And so if I take that and apply it to what we're saying here about the black-eyed kids, it would make sense to me that they would be allowed to tell the truth up to a certain point. But then because they can only lie and deceive, then a part of that has to be untrue. and so they would have to
can't
like
help it.
shave 10% off the top. You know what I mean? Because they can't go the whole 100. But then I thought TJ's alien theory was very interesting, and it made me kind of go back and consider like a multi-dimensional idea to it, where if we're dealing with like multiverse and different timelines and different universes, it also could be that these beings in moving through universes are maybe hitting one that's like not Earth 1 but Earth 1.0001, where it's like the timeline is just ever so different. You know what I mean? And as they're moving through timelines and moving through dimensions, that could be leading them to places where they're just askew of what completely accurate would be, which would be interesting too.
Yeah, it does sort of make sense that if you're talking about interdimensionality, and I mean, I'm by no means an expert on this, so if what I'm about to say is wrong and you're listening, like, let me know.
I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me know and tell me why, because I'd like to know why I'm wrong here and get better. But it almost would make sense with interdimensionality and like time, right? That if you're shooting for a certain place on Earth, like coordinates, right? Like you're just hoping to land there, so to speak. Yeah. And maybe your recon on Earth is just whatever you can find, and it is kind of weird that it would be very outdated recon, so to speak, given we haven't been projecting crap out into space for that long, right? Like signals and things like that. But that you're just shooting for a spot, a place in time, right? And you land there, and so there's just this sort of, I'm just glad I'm here, and what I've learned about this place, I guess, is just what I know, and I don't know, maybe there's an element of that too, because like even when we talked about what's his name, darn it, the dude from the Mothman, Indrid Cold. If you remember when we talked about Indrid Cold, he's dressed out of date as well. He looked different. He almost looked like steampunk. He almost looked steampunkish, if you're familiar with the genre. And that's pretty unique, right? Unless you're like a nerd going to a Comic-Con, most people don't dress that way, So even he like looks a little out of the norm. And he even describes like where he's from is this place, where people like look. He looks almost human, but not human, sort of that uncanny valley thing, so to speak. But I actually have another story. I went and found some. Nice. This one, I've got two more. And one of them is of an older couple who let one in. Oh. Yeah. So this one is on Reddit. And you can believe everything you read on Reddit, right?
100%.
This is from 2 years ago. This is called I've Encountered the Black-Eyed Children. So it says, I'll just read it word for word here, so forgive me, guys. This is not me writing. Alternate account, but longtime lurker of this sub. An old friend hit me up. I started reminiscing and remembered this. I believe I've encountered the Black-Eyed Children over a decade ago in rural Appalachia. This has always low-key disturbed me. Keeping in touch to this day, we've never brought it up again. We were at a local state park, sort of a place between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m., which is a really weird time now reading this to be in a state park, by the way, unless you're camping, I suppose.
Unless you're camping overnight. Yeah.
Right.
I remember we were parked alongside the woods at some picnic tables. It was pretty desolate. We were technically trespassing. I was a 17 female and 17 male at the time. And
they were on Lover's Lane, dude.
Exactly. And what we were doing there, you can leave to your imagination. But,
okay.
All right. As our curfews were approaching, we were finishing up our time together. We experienced a very ominous feeling. He was in the driver's seat preparing to start the car and pull off. The car didn't start. We sort of laughed it off as it wasn't the first time and talked. Suddenly to the right, the passenger side where I was sitting, we see faint lights coming out of the woods. The ominous feeling intensified. Emerging from the woods, there are 4 to 5 children, younger than us. They appear to be between the ages of 7 and 11 years old. I'm not going to claim they had black eyes. It was dark and I don't remember as well as I should. I didn't read about the black-eyed kids, lore, or phenomenon until years later, which described everything else that we experienced. All I can say is that they were not normal. They did not belong. The cabins at the park were not occupied. They weren't even getting rented out as it was autumn, wintertime. We were miles from the park's hotel, and there were no adults. They were absolutely out of place. What were the lights? I don't know, but the closest thing I can compare them to are glow sticks, as if they had opened a package of those novelty glow sticks that included bracelets, necklaces, or wands, but it wasn't like they were having fun with them or goofing off. They just stopped, stood there, and stared at us. He tried asking what they were doing there and if they were lost. Where were their parents? There was no response. The oldest looking child, a bit heavyset with a gray hoodie on, approached the vehicle just in front where the passenger headlight corner would be. My friend started really freaking out at this moment. He locked the doors and was like, hell no, we got to get out of here. Eventually the car started. The children didn't move and stayed put in front of the car. My friend eventually yelled to the kid, I'm going to run you over, before the boy eventually backed away, raised his arm, and pointed at us as we were leaving. I did not look back. I'm absolutely terrified writing this up. To my recollection, these are the facts. This is a true story. That's pretty creepy. Not necessarily a black-eyed kids encounter, but it is sort of you can't prove that it was a black-eyed kids encounter, I guess, because of what happened. And, she said, or I assume this is the she, way they described the encounter, you couldn't see the eyes, but kids out in the middle of the woods is a pretty creepy thing. I almost think that, man. Wouldn't you guys agree that the idea of encountering children out in the middle of the woods gives you more of a paranormal vibe than just encountering an adult-aged person out in the woods?
Yeah, it injects that idea of like liminality into the story. Mm-hmm. Just things that like do not belong. It seems familiar, but it's not, and they put an emphasis on them, and they were like, these kids were out of place.
Right.
Everything about that is creepy as hell.
Yeah, sure. No question, dude. Yeah, no, that's a neat way to kind of catch it a little bit there. So encountered and survived, but yeah, dude, no, and it all kind of ties into the same thing. But honestly, I think the reason that they are so creepy and everybody gets such a horror vibe from them is just that awkwardness, and especially some of the descriptions of what happens when they don't get their way, like that 1950s account. And I've seen that depicted in movies and shorts and everything else as well, to where there's like that insane scream that they are depicted as doing sometimes when, regular verbal interactions don't work, or they don't get what it is they're asking for, because they're always asking for something. Somebody runs or somebody drives off, and there's that crazy screech that they kind of kick out, which was what was so neat about that 1950s journal entry, is that it was likening it to a bobcat. That's a very interesting thing.
I've heard bobcats
scream,
dude. And they can sound. If you don't know what you're hearing the first time, it sounds like a woman being attacked.
It really does.
You don't know what you're listening to.
Dude, when I was in Japan, my dad was stationed there. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to what sounded like a little boy outside saying "mama." And I listened to it for a few minutes. I was like, what the fuck? Like, to me, I had no other thought in my head other than there was a child outside loud enough saying the word "mama." I went and got my parents, and I was like, hey, there's a little kid outside. Like, my window faced the backyard. So in my brain, I'm like 12, right? Like, there's a little kid in our backyard asking for a mom. And they're like, what? And I'm like, come to my room and listen, So they came, and nothing happened, of course. So now I'm like freaked the fuck out. You know what I mean? Like, thinking like it's a ghost or some shit like that. But then it started up again. But because like what I had told my parents was so unsettling, they didn't go to sleep, and my mom heard it. And my dad came into my room where I guess like it was loud enough or louder, and he listened. He's like, what the hell? I was like, do you hear that? And he was like, yeah. Well, he went downstairs and turned the porch light on. It was a cat sitting on the back fence, and it was making this dude, and it sounded like just like
it's probably in heat.
Yeah. And so my dad just went and grabbed like his BDU boot and chucked it at the back fence, and it hit the fence and scared the cat off. But yeah, dude, it's so cats can, man. Like it sounded like a little kid outside in the middle of the night. I have no idea what time it was. It was nighttime, yelling or screaming for mama, which is really creepy. But this story honestly also made me think of that. Have you guys seen that like documentary on YouTube, Hellier? It's called Hellier, Hellier. So it's tied into the whole Kelly Hopkinsville goblins thing that we've talked about a little bit, and mostly like synchronicity and Mothman. But one of the things that happens in the like the documentary, if anybody listening hasn't seen it, I recommend watching it. It's pretty interesting. It can be a little dry, but it's interesting. Is they go to this town Hellier where they are hoping to find somebody who was contacting them via email, if I remember right. And they start interviewing all these people, and they are like asking them questions about, have you guys seen anything out of the ordinary growing up? And they're like, no. Like, did you guys see anything weird? Like, growing up, did you experience anything strange? Blah, 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 blah. And everybody kept saying no. And they're like, what the hell, dude? Like, this is really weird. Like, everybody we talked to says they never had these experiences. Well, then they like reframed the question and started talking to somebody. And they realized that the thing they were looking for wasn't out of the ordinary. And then what they were asking was just the thing that they all grew up with. So when they were asking, did you experience anything out of the ordinary? They hadn't, but it was out of the ordinary for them, which is sort of interesting.
Yeah.
And one of the things they said is that everybody in that area of Appalachia and this area over the Mammoth Cave system, they are taught that if you heard or hear your name being called from the woods, or somebody yelling, for help from the woods, or you see a kid you don't recognize in the woods, and they're trying to get you to come into the woods, that you don't follow, whether you hear your name or a cry for help, or you follow a kid into the woods, because it's just luring you there, and you'll go into the caves and you won't ever come back out. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like stories like this with the whole kid thing, like in this story, it says I encountered the black-eyed children, and I in full disclosure, to my detriment, didn't read this story thinking I would preserve the creepiness of it by not reading it prior. She doesn't say this is a black-eyed kid. She says this is a black-eyed kid experience, but there's no proof that it's a black-eyed kid experience. It's just a creepy kids in the woods thing, which could be, and it does match some of the other elements like she says, but that this whole thing about kids in the woods is a really strange and global phenomenon as well, because even like the German, I lived in Germany a lot in my life. The Germans have stories like this too. And a lot of them are like, could be kids, or what they describe could be gnomes, like which gnomes are known to be tricksters and, not necessarily evil, but also not good. And there you have a very prominent part in German folklore, Austrian folklore, Swiss, French, like all these like Central European cultures have these stories too, which I think lends a lot to even more to the creepiness factor of all these things, is that a lot of cultures around the world have these stories.
I've been to Mammoth Cave. I went with my grandpa Jack. May he rest in peace. And while we were there, because he lived in northern Kentucky for the entire latter half of his life, and that's where I grew up before my dad started pastoring and we moved away. But one year we went back, and I went to the Mammoth Cave system with my grandpa and my grandma and some of my extended family, and we toured the caves and did all that. And it's an awesome place to go visit if nobody's been there. But while we were there, my grandpa and grandma did tell me around the campfire one night exactly what you just said, Brandon. Like, hey, if you hear anybody calling your name in the woods or whatever, it's just like don't follow them, don't go with them. At the time, I just took it as like stranger danger.
Stranger danger.
Like, of course, I wouldn't do that. But you just brought that back to my memory that I hadn't thought about in decades. That we went there, and that was a legitimate thing that my grandpa told me while we were over there hanging out. And those legends, they permeate Appalachia to the point where it's part of the culture there. It's part of the lore. It's
right.
Things that you just grow up with, like exactly like you just said, that you don't find weird when people say it back to you like that. You're like, well, yeah.
Right. It's part of my life.
My grandpa told me the same thing.
That's right. What's funny as it is, there was a movie I literally just watched called The Soul Eater that covers a very similar topic, and sort of the whole thing when it's translated from French that it's saying is, if you hear the woods calling, if you hear the song, if you hear his name, then that means basically that you're wanted. And you're not supposed to go into the woods, essentially. And what it ends up being, kind of throw the spoilers aside and everything, I won't get deep into it just in case anybody wants to watch it. It's a pretty new movie, but there is similar creatures to the so-called Soul Eater, which is the translation of that particular village, that are in villages all over that whole entire region, and they all have different names, but they all basically have the same tale behind them. They all have slightly different appearances. One, like looks like he has a face that's made out of like animal skin with large horns, and then others depict the horns as being more more natural, like tree branches and so on and so forth. But
Like
all
antlers
similarities
almost.
kind of kicking on. So yeah,
Now you
exactly.
just sound like you're describing Wendigo.
No, you
Yeah.
do. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
very true. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so the last story I have is the one I told you about where they get let in. Okay.
Oh.
So, yep. So, again, I'll just read you this word for bird. One of the stories goes like this. In the snowy town within the middle of nowhere, Vermont, an elderly couple heard the sound of 3 loud knocks on their door. They opened the door and saw 2 children, a boy and a girl. Parents will be here soon. May we come in? The children did not make eye contact and just stood there in the doorway. The elderly couple were hesitant, but after a while they let the boy and the girl inside. The kids settled on the couch while the wife made some hot cocoa, and the husband asked them questions that went unanswered. The wife returned and noticed that her cat was scared and angry with the children. May we please use the restroom? The wife looked at the kids and she finally saw them. The children's eyes were as black as a starless universe. She directed them to the bathroom and returned to her husband, who was covering his face with his hand. Did you see their eyes? The husband then showed her his hand was full of blood from a nosebleed. The power suddenly went out, and the house turned as dark as the kids' eyes. The wife headed to the restroom and was confronted by the voice of the kids at the end of the hall, uttering, "Our parents are here." The kids then exited the house, leaving the door wide open. The wife then noticed that there were 2 men at the end of the driveway. They were very tall and slender. The wife waved but did not receive the same friendly gesture. The 2 men and children then drove away together in one car. The power then came back on a little later after the kids left. Throughout the next week, weird things happened in the house. 3 out of 4 cats went missing, and the 4th had been found dead in the pool of its own blood. The husband continued to have nosebleeds and finally went to the doctor, where he was diagnosed with very aggressive skin cancer. This legend even crossed bodies of water and landed in the great land of the UK, where in 2014, the Daily Star wrote 3 front-page stories about sightings of black-eyed kids in the haunted pub in Staffordshire. Ghost hunters who believed that the black-eyed kids were extraterrestrials, vampires, or ghosts took these alleged sightings seriously. Blah, 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 blah. So that story, that's the one I found where they actually let them in, which is
Yeah,
pretty
I've
creepy.
heard that Vermont story, man. Yeah, I
Yeah?
remember that. And it was like they were there for not long, and yeah, it blacked out, and then they were gone. And then the husband, I think, I do believe, yeah, I heard that he ended up with cancer, and the wife had a slew of medical issues as well. And shortly,
Right.
a little bit further down the road, she took the same thing, nosebleed problems, and then she had
Oh,
all
geez.
kinds of different issues. And they both believe that it was due to allowing them to come into the home.
Yeah. See, that one's
all
that one's
messed up.
interesting because they didn't feel a sense of foreboding at all. They just opened the door
Right.
to the kids and let them in. Like they were reticent, I guess, because like it's strange, but they didn't feel that same sense that a lot of other people feel. And then too, them getting sick, the blood, all of that. It's pretty synonymous with other stories of people that have encountered like demonic or negative beings where their health takes a turn. They encounter lots of bad luck, all of that. Like, do you think that is like could be the purpose of like black-eyed kids is just to inflict harm?
Definitely could be, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to evil spirits, man, like it's hard for people to understand, like real evil, and it's very interesting to me that it's even harder for like American suburbanite Christians to understand pure evil, even though it's in the Word of God. Those of us that have been overseas, TJ, with some of the work that you've done, like we've come to face with real evil in physical form. And so it's like, for us, of course, like I've seen people mistreat children for no reason. I've seen people, I've had people try to kill me for no other reason than they hated me for the country that I came from. So it's like I can understand pure evil, and the Bible is absolutely chock full of it. And when you're dealing with negative spirits, when you're dealing with demons specifically, like you're dealing with a spiritual entity that hates you as a human being, as a child of God, and everything about you for no other reason than you are a beloved child of God, and wants to see the destruction of your soul by any means possible. And so, like, when you ask, is the point of them to cause harm to people? Like, I would say, if you are dealing with a demon, then yeah, 100%. Just let me be close to you. Again, there's the whole like knocking on the door, let me in so that I can be in your presence, so that you're inviting. Again, this goes back to like spiritual right and spiritual law. If you allow it in the house, then you have invited, that demon is now allowed to be there and allowed to conduct whatever evil that it wants to, because you invited it in, you allowed it to be there.
Let me ask you this question then,
but that's
right?
the big if they are demons. I say yes.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I'm getting with this, right? Like, why, if it's demonic, right? And there's all these other accounts and stories of people's encounters with a demonic possession, all these other things, hauntings or whatever to call them, hauntings. Like, why the knocks at the door? Why the car? Like all this stuff. It just seems so of this plane, of this earth, to use a vehicle, to knock on the door, like all of these things. It just seems, not that, but also shares so many characteristics. That's why I find them so intriguing, because they do really just pattern check with all of these different, groups or genres. Like, it sounds demonic 100%. It's absolutely evil, right? But then they're being picked up by the men in black, so to speak. Well, they're being driven around. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Yeah,
no, I just think that brings up a very interesting point, and that's like that we're assuming that every single one of these accounts of something that looks like a black-eyed kid is of the same source. Mm-hmm. And I think I think that evil can pattern after evil. Like, I think that, something that could be extraterrestrial in nature the first time around, and then a demon looks at it and goes, well, that would be a pretty fun thing to cosplay. Mm-hmm. And then another one's from like a demonic source. So I don't think that they necessarily all have to be of the exact same origin.
Yeah, no,
in
absolutely.
order to pattern after each other. I mean, you see it all the time in the way that, like,
copycat
different
killers.
terrorist organizations. Yeah, copycat killers. Yeah, another great example. Yeah.
No, that's an interesting thought. I think that there's just evil out there, whatever you want to call it, evil spirits, evil entities mimicking one another, trying to find the most convincing and successful way to intrude on your life and ruin it, Sure. And it is interesting, too, as well, to think like, well, if we're talking about demons, like, we know who they work for. But if we're not talking about demons, like, who do they work for?
Yeah.
Right. Very, very true. And of course, I mean, this is it's a great ploy because of the child aspect. Initially, you trust an approach of a child. You generally don't question a child that seems to be approaching you from the distance. In fact, the first things that come to your mind is, does this child need help? I don't see any parents around. I don't see any older siblings around. Something's going on here. So it gives a gateway until you see them black eyes, man.
The gateway drug.
Remember, there was another one that I'd heard about. I think it was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I want to say it was like 2010 or 2012 or something like that. But there was a guy who their neighborhood all decorated really heavily for Halloween, like haunted houses in the driveways and all that kind of fun stuff. And he was always a participant, and his place was bare a couple days before Halloween was about to kick off. And a neighbor went over and asked him why he hadn't put out his decorations. And he said that the year prior, there were two kids that looked like they were probably in the 12 to 14 range that were on his porch right before midnight, late for trick-or-treating. Thought it was kind of weird, but he kind of had his candy by the door still and everything, so he put one hand on the bowl and opened up the door, and he said as soon as he could kind of see the reflection of the streetlights, he saw that they had those deep black eyes, and they were insisting that they wanted to come into his house, and then he slammed the door in fear and basically just sat there the whole rest of the night. But he said as he approached the door, something kind of told him he probably shouldn't open it, but he opened it anyway because it was Halloween, so I just figured it was probably the older kids late trick-or-treating. But yeah.
Dude, that's creepy. I wouldn't decorate my house anymore either, dude. I'm not making it any more inviting for any of this nonsense.
That's right.
Dude, that's one of the things about being out here that I cannot wait to get away from the Pacific Northwest. People go, and I'm all for people like getting into Halloween. Like you understand, like everybody kind of has their holiday that they like to go all out for.
Sure.
But there's a thing out here specifically there people will decorate for Halloween, and I mean like all out. This isn't just like putting up the cheap stuff on the windows, like let me in, it looks like a zombie
the
house,
window
and then call
cleans,
it-
yeah.
whatever. This is no, they go all out, and I'm talking like 15-foot statues and things that
Oh, yeah.
look absolutely realistic, that scare the shit out of my kids. And then they will leave this stuff up all year long,
Right.
like in violation of the housing rules and whatever, and they'll just leave them up because it's like for them Halloween is like a way of life, and it's like they're trying to
Right.
channel Halloween all year long, and it's not just like one
Well,
or
they're
two
Jack
weird
and
houses.
Sally, right?
That's what I'm saying, but to
No
me
doubt.
it's like I'm cool with people enjoying Halloween. I take my kids trick or treating, but I find it to be bizarre and somewhat unsettling if Halloween is your way of life.
Agreed.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so
And
I think I have a great way
I'm excited to be
frame
far
this.
away from that.
So around the corner from me, there was a couple, and they did Halloween sort of like that. What you're talking about, it wasn't all year, but it was. They had like the real life, like movie prop quality. Linda Blair from The Exorcist, Jason, Freddy Krueger, all
Yeah.
these things, and like their house, they had the purple and orange lights, the strobes, the dry ice, all this stuff, and they put stuff on the roof, everything. It was nuts. Like it's really cool, like to see like this like high quality stuff like somebody has, but like they, it intentionally was done to be scary, because I also think there are different brands of people who like Halloween. There's people like me who enjoy Halloween for like the cozy spook of it and the traditional Halloween, jack-o'-lantern. We'll watch, Charlie Brown, Great Pumpkin. We'll watch Hocus Pocus, these things
Beetlejuice.
right. Like the quintessential, like not, it's like I said, it's cozy spook, right? And then there's the people that like Halloween for all the like horror movies and the slashers and all that stuff. And like, you're definitely different people. And then my neighbor across the street from me, they go ham every holiday, and it's pretty cool. And like, they are like my parents' age, so there's one of those people. It's like it's October 1st, the shit goes up. It's November 1st, the shit comes down, and it's down. So, but they have like a bunch of different things they do. Where like they had a ghost pirate ship in their front yard that's like huge. It's badass. They had one year they had skeletons playing soccer. Like that's meant to entertain, right? It's not like a way of life. But then I know these people you're talking about, right? I remember on base, which I just want to say to the thing you were talking about, because you're talking about in violation of the housing rules, just another way standards have fallen on base. Like I remember my dad, when I was growing up, would be like, get your ass out there and mow the lawn because I'm not getting a ticket, because somebody would drive by and give us a ticket. My dad would have to take it to his first sergeant and be like, why the fuck was your grass too long on Saturday? Dead ass. Like that's the way it used to be. It's not like that anymore. But I know there is a couple that we were acquainted with, weren't really friends with, but acquainted with, that lived on base when I was at Travis. And they were like that all year round. Everything was Nightmare Before Christmas. Everything was The Conjuring. Everything was The Exorcist. Everything was Freddy, was Jason, was Freddy, all of this stuff. And it was just like... And they had an entire garage full of stuff that they would put out, and it would be up for like 6 months, and they were just like very odd people. I'll just leave it like that,
Yeah, I just think it's
there's something wrong there.
An unhealthy preoccupation
It is.
with death.
That's right. Yeah.
And evil.
Obsessive personalities.
Yeah. It's not like
There's
you're
a lot of
lazy and
them.
your Christmas lights are still up in March, that's different.
Right.
Hey, come on, man. Up and down.
I'm calling you out, TJ.
That's freaking awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Look, you were going to
But
say
yeah,
something
no.
about the Halloween thing. TJ?
Oh, there's same thing out here. There's tons of people who have that kind of stuff going on, and because I, of course, live in the middle of nowhere, there are places that I pass occasionally that are about 20 miles out from here that have decided that they have their property line fences out where they've got acreage, and they have those massive, like 15-foot skeletons. They've taken down all the rest of the Halloween decorations, but I guess because those things are probably so hard to put up, and they look like they're made out of some pretty sturdy freaking material. That's for sure. These aren't inflatables or anything. These things were constructed. A bunch of them have just left them out, and they're throwing like random stuff on them. Like one of them's got a gigantic hunter's outfit on right now. It's like a massive
funny.
hunter looking. Yeah, dude. He's got the orange vest and the whole boat.
That brings up a whole thing. I can't stand it when when people leave up the tree and then just redecorate the Christmas tree for every other holiday.
Valentine's Day tree.
And then now it's a
Of
Valentine's
course it
tree,
is.
and now it's a St. Patrick's tree, and now and I'm like, I
Easter
cannot
tree.
stand that. I cannot stand
It's
that.
stuffed
And
eggs in
and I'll
it.
tell you why. There's more of a philosophical reason behind this, and that is just it's the bleed over of traditions. Traditions are sacrosanct for a reason, and then when you start letting tradition bleed from one thing over into another, and I can already hear people like talk about it. It's like, oh, but what about somebody's going to make some kind of immigration argument about it and stuff like that, and being an American melting pot. And yeah, that's all fine and good, but part of the thing that makes a tradition special is that it only happens at one point on the calendar, and you enjoy it for what it is, and then
Loses its specialness.
it goes away so that you can enjoy it again next year. If you're just leaving it up and allowing traditions to bleed one into the other, then you've taken away the thing that makes them special, and then you've just got a weird plastic tree in your house, man.
Well, it's sort of like you go into Walmart in July and they've got the Halloween stuff out already, right?
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
because then you got to see it all July, all August, and
Right.
September, right? And so it just it becomes a part of the background. It's not exciting anymore,
Right.
The same thing, like it'll be October and they'll have Christmas stuff out already, even though Halloween hasn't happened. Then it's like, dude, come on, can we just like get this shit? And it's all and that reason is different than what you're talking about. Like that's consumerism, and trying to make more
Correct.
money, right? By having it out, by virtue of having it out longer. But I agree with you, man. Like it's like a sign of our culture just wanting everything now and not having that ability to just sustain. It's about immediate gratification, and if you can just have that feeling all year long, like it does, like it's April now, I guarantee you by middle of the year there'll be something out that's Halloween related,
Yeah.
I guarantee
Right.
it, and I probably could could probably find a Walmart in this country right now where there's 4th of July shit out because they do the same thing,
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like I don't like that either. Like keep things special the way they are, because that's why it's so appreciated. That's what gives anything its value is scarcity, right? So if you're sort of eroding that, the thing that makes it valuable by making it constantly available all the time. I was just going to say one more thing on this topic about like weirdness and people, dude. So when I was in college, then I actually went, like the first college I went to was a school in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, oddly enough, is a theme apparently in this podcast, from politics to Black Eyed Kids, or the Slender Man to now weirdos. But
It's a spooky
anyway,
place.
it is kind of a spooky place actually. But I went to a small school way up in northern Wisconsin on the Chequamegon Bay, and I ended up shout out. I knew this kid who was like really, really into Halloween and really, really into anything like a lot of the like dark manga and things like that, and like had this like one of these, like, it wasn't really my friend, he was just like in the friend group, and I played soccer at this small college, and so he was like the friend of somebody, and he just happened to be around all the time because of like where college dorms are. But I remember one time, everything he talked about was like creepy related, and like his personality always just seemed off. And like I've always sort of prided myself on like being able to judge people's energy really well, and something always just felt off with this kid. And anyway, so we are having like a party, and it's a themed party, like Halloween themed party. and it's not Halloween, but it's a Halloween themed party, and everybody is like down at the end of one end of the building, and he asked for help for something in his room, and me and this guy Trevor, I knew also on the soccer team, we walked down the hall with him, and we went into his room, and we go into his room, and like I think he was getting something. Honestly think he was trying to get one of his fucking animals out from under his bed. I'm trying to remember exactly what he was asking for. He wasn't supposed to have animals, but he was hiding like rodents. Anyway, we were in his room, and I noticed that like he had a lot of creepy crap. Like he had like the actual like satanic pentagram with like the goat head poster on the wall, and like a couple of, like really like dark, like demonic looking pictures and flags and things like that. And he had like the creepy like blue and green lights and all this shit. Like I remember Trevor and I like looked over at one another like, man, this is like a creepy ass fucking room. And I remember even thinking like, I would hate to be this motherfucker's like roommate, because nobody had their own room. Right. Anyway, so we're standing there, and he was like getting out from under the bed, and you can say like whatever you want to say, like this could have been somebody in the hallway, but the fucking door to this kid's room just slammed closed. And we're like, whoa, what the fuck? And like he turned up and turned around, and he just kind of laughed. And we're like, I didn't slam the door. And he just says, I know. And I was like, okay, well, we're done. And I remember just like leaving his room. Like, I don't need to continue helping you anymore. And it could have been somebody reached in and closed the door. Like it could have been like, I didn't see it happen, but the door slammed. And I mean, I always remember that as like one of those things where it's like, that was really creepy. It could have been totally somebody in the hallway, but it also could have been creepy shit. I don't know.
Dude, my wife sent me an Instagram post earlier. We're doing a lot of looking at houses and floor plans and stuff like that right now. And it was just this one where a person was like, so I just bought this home and working on recarpeting the living room, and this is what I found when we ripped the carpet up, and it's the hardwood floor of the living room, and scraped into the hardwood floor is the full-on pentagram in the star.
Right.
It takes up the entire room. And I was just like, dude, if I had found something like that, I'd be like on the phone with the general contractor.
Yes.
I'm like, we're taking this floor down to the studs, first of all. And then I'd be on the phone with the priest, and I'd be like, I need both of you to come out here right meow. We getting ready to walk. We're getting ready to walk the four corners of this property. I need you to go ahead and bring your anointing oil. All my Protestants out there, you know about the anointing oil. I need you to bring that. If bring me the holy water. We got some stuff to do.
Yeah. No, I would too, man. Yeah. I think I've told everybody this story on the podcast, so I won't repeat it, but like us moving into that house we moved into in England, where it had the St. Michael's coins that were sitting in the corners of the windows, and come to find out that they'd had the house blessed to remove whatever was in the house by the Anglican priest in England, and all the fun that I had for a year that lived there, and everything my family, my parents and my brother and sister lived through for the next 3 years after I moved out. I don't know why they stayed in that house. Really? Evidently haunted house. From day one, we had experiences in that house. That story, my mom and I were just in the kitchen putting away, emptying boxes from moving, and we just heard something start walking up the stairs, and we were the only ones in the house who walked out and into the foyer and listened to it finish, go up the stairs, walk down the hallway, and walk into my parents' room. And it was literally day one, morning one, like ghost, Yep. And dude, for 4 years they were in that house. Pretty wild. But anyway, that's all the bullets I had in my gun for this, guys. And
beautiful.
Yeah, dude, we're at 2 hours already, which is wild.
Yeah, man.
It is.
That's a good
an
almost
awesome
2 hours.
topic, though.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody love them black-eyed kids.
Yeah, just black kids are as smart as white kids.
Yeah.
That's our Biden.
If you don't take anything away from the first section of episode 100, don't let them in.
Don't let them in.
Exactly.
Don't let them
That's
in.
pretty much the rule with all of the everythings, and that'll roll right into everything that I've got to talk about as well. I got a smorgasbord of stuff, depending on how much time we want to put on this. I've got a couple key exorcism cases from a couple different centuries, as well as a quick slew of pictorial assisted list that I put together of the end of 2024, basically mid 2024 up through 2025 of movies that are not woke, that are worth watching, that I've watched recently, that I think is an important category, because there's actually a website called Non-Woke and another one called Non-Woke Shows, I think. But the way they rate everything doesn't actually really tell you anything at all. It tells you what a couple people might think or whatever else, and it doesn't really tell you whether or not this stuff is actually woke. Like, they don't just come out and say, yes, this is woke, probably don't watch this, if that kind of stuff irritates the crap out of you.
Yeah.
They sort of give it these shaded over ratings, and, you know, I can't stand the swappings and, you know, especially like the stuff they do with
Snow
the
White
swapping and
crap?
the sexes particularly. The Snow White crap is one of them for sure. Well, that one turned around and bit him in the butt. Now they put a whole bunch of little people out of work after the little people, like that dude
Disney
from,
screwed up so bad, dude.
It was
for real
hilarious to watch.
Well, I'm trying to think of what that dude's name is. And you guys might know the little guy from
Lord Farquaad.
the guy who was
Peter
on
Dinklage.
Game of Thrones.
Peter Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage.
Yep.
Yeah, so he was complaining
Tyrion Lannister.
that people like him don't get taken serious as actors because they only get placed in roles that basically are stereotypical about their physicality.
He's an angry elf.
And then all of a
North
sudden,
Pole elf.
of course, now they're all complaining they didn't get cast in the Snow White thing because of his statements. They decided
You
they
can't
were gonna
have
cast a
it
bunch
both
of
ways,
creepy-
Peter.
Right.
Exactly. They were going to cast
Notice
that
me, but
first
not
cast
too
of like
hard.
all the creepy trans looking people and all that stuff. Did you guys see that original
Yes,
footage where they were going to put like a
so
whole bunch
bad,
of full grown men, women, and stuff
Right.
in there, and then they just decided to CGI it? Which,
So are we starting? Sorry, Brandon. Are we starting
Very
with the
good.
movies and then moving to The Exorcist, or are we going to keep it creepy and then come back to the movies?
I'll let TJ decide.
Ooh, well,
Because-
let's
Go ahead.
go ahead, brother.
Well, I'm waiting to
sure
hear your
there-
decision because I have a question.
Oh, okay. If we wanted to break the ice, I could roll through a quick list. I think I've got like 11 or 12 of them.
Okay,
that are
so the
just
movies?
ones that came right off the top of my head. Sure, why not?
Okay, so my question for you guys, and I think this is like really important, is to define woke. Like, have we ever done that here? Like, what woke actually means? If we're going to say these are non-woke movies, because I'd be
Sure.
interested to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I think in essence we have. We never like sought out to, in one schwack, define what it means. You know,
Sure.
You know, I think if I had to give like a definition of woke, it would be offense for things that aren't worthy of being offended over is an example. Having secondhand offense for other people. Thinking you know better than other people when it comes to like their own culture. Forgetting that we are, all of us, like human beings in general, came from a long line of people who made mistakes over and over and over again and learned lessons to get where we're at. So nothing is inherently original to anybody, right? That now it's sort of reached over into, I think that was like the early definition of woke, right? Like when millennials, like our generation, finally like became adults and, you know, did the whole hipster thing with the scarves
Right.
For no reason. And we're listening to like the Lumineers all the time, even though they probably didn't like them. And, you know, so I blame my generation for the beginning of that. And I think Gen Z took it like to the next level with, because canceling was a part of woke and millennials were doing that too. And then, I think it became, I was just sorry. Last thing I'll say, and I'll let you go. I'm sorry. No, that the last thing I'll say is that then it started to encompass like everything that is and has been wrong with like specifically our country in the past. So like slavery, racism, you know, the putting down of the gay community, all of these things, right? And then blowing them up because you're so bored and picking up the torch for it and trying to move the ball even further down the court, even though it's sort of like taken care of. Like the new civil rights era, I remember it seeing as called one time, and like there are these people that are still alive from like the 1960s during the civil rights era who lived through Jim Crow laws in the South, all these things. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this is not the same, you know? And so I
Exactly.
think it's like, it's the human need to have a cause and they're bored. So they find all these things to turn into problems. Bathrooms. Dudes can be chicks. Chicks can be dudes. All these things that the rest of the world doesn't have problems with because they have real problems. You know what I mean? Like, and I know that's not a definition, right? Because it's so, I mean, like, if we could sit here and probably put all that into Chat GPT and be like, give me an encyclopedia-like definition of all of this. But, like, that's how I view, like, what woke is. And anti-religious as well, I would say. But anti-Christian, I should say.
Right.
You know, and there's like the woke right now as well, I'll say, which would be a fun conversation, which is becoming anti-Semitic, which is really weird and interesting. But anyway, I would say like original woke is anti-Christian, because you can't say anti-religious because they're definitely pro-Muslim without knowing what the fuck they're talking about.
And anyway. Satanism, even in many cases as well.
Satanism, yeah,
and
sure.
They want to protect those
go
rights.
Off, go off, TJ. Go off, girl.
I've got a pretty simple one, actually, man. As far as like movies and TV shows are concerned, it is literally the DEI and CRT of media. That is all it is.
Yeah.
Basically, it has the proper amount
Critical
of gender
race
roles stuck in it. It has the proper amount of race swaps going on, to where if it was based on comic books per se, to where they're swapping white characters with black characters, swapping male characters with female characters, making female characters that are depicted as a 95-pound, 5-foot woman capable of throwing a 200-pound, 6-foot one man around, and things along those lines, making it to where women are always the heroes, men are always the villains, doing basically all of these things to go exactly against what we truly are as people and the progress of our society. So taking away from the progress, making movies excessively racist all the time, to where a white guy is always a villain, black guy is always a hero, white guy is always doing something that is racially inclined, depicting cops as always being racist, depicting people in the military as being racist, doing things like that to try to discredit anyone who is usually in a role that is serving the public. Somebody who used to be a hero is now always looked at as categorically being a villain, and anybody who has always cried villain falsely are always the heroes now in all of these movies. So that is kind of the woke regime, reasons why movies like the Marvels failed. Where you know, and it's happened so heavily across so many different things right now. If you have a Netflix subscription or a Hulu subscription and you go to look at movies and you go to the action category, which is, I'm an old school guy. I love old school action movies, and I love movies that kept that hope alive, which some of the ones I've got on this list are movies like that for people who dig that kind of stuff, and I am definitely deep in that. They are all women now, if you look across the action category.
Oh, yeah.
All of the action heroes are these women, and they're generally kind of I'll say again, kind of an androgynous character. They are sort of maybe Latina, Asian-esque, so they're not quite black, they're not white, you can't really tell for sure. They have to have this generic freaking quality about them as well, but they always have bitch face, so that they, I'm the tough street girl. Okay, cool. That's great. Yeah, yet again, throwing around 250-pound men like they're nothing when, this is a 5-foot, 90-pound chick. Happens a lot in the real world. We've seen the videos of what happens when females in law enforcement that are of that particular stature. Oh, dude. That's exactly right. So in that, these are movies that I came across in a world where this is pretty much all that's out there, especially in the superhero universe as well. Most of the superhero films have gone horrible. Of course, the Marvel universe is seeing one of the biggest declines they've ever seen in their movie franchises, because they did the same thing. They followed the stupid freaking narrative.
Disney again.
Yep, Disney is a huge one right there. It's something that used to be one of the most family-friendly movie, creators there is. They're falling apart because of it, and there's just been some that have popped out of the woodworks that I watched and didn't shut off 20 minutes in, which is pretty awesome when that can happen. And some I've seen in the theater as well recently with my family and everything else. So got a handful of these bad boys I'm going to throw out. Some of them are very new and some of them are not, but I'm going to whip them up on the screen here really quick.
Well, before you jump off on the list,
of course,
this is the perfect time for me to remember that I'm legally required to tell you guys
Good call.
that any and all opinions that I have are
gay.
completely and totally my own. And they do not represent the United States Army, the Department of Defense, or any other entity within the United States government. But that being said, I agree with everything that you guys said about defining wokeness. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I wish I came up with this definition. I didn't, but I heard it, and I was like, I think that perfectly encapsulates it in like a short sentence. And it's just wokeness is the religious practice of political correctness. So like everything that you
Perfect.
guys said, right, it boils down because the place where everybody kind of started having a problem with woke was when they started doing all these things and they started changing your movies. They started, Brandon, to all of your points, right, about like, hey, now we got to go after the bathrooms, and now we've got to go after women's sports, and now we got to go after like that all is born. Now we got to go key the Teslas. Now we got to go. And what's really funny is the reason it's so like constantly dichotomous is because by the nature of political correctness is that it's always changing. But it's when these people religiously practice whatever the current thing is in political correctness, like therein you have woke.
Yeah, it'll always come for you. It always will come for you.
But
Did I blame?
No, please.
I blame millennials, dude, and their affinity for being contrarian to tradition. I remember, this is like 2006, 2007, like 2000, maybe like entering like the 2010s, right? Seeing this like fad that my generation had with like breaking tradition for everything. And I remember thinking like, that's just really stupid. Like there's nothing wrong with like blazing your own trail. That's not what I'm saying. But like being anti-tradition for the sake of being anti-tradition is a dogmatic or quote unquote religious way of thinking, And I would just remember thinking like that just seems so wrong. Like, fine, you don't want to wear a white dress to your wedding, right? Like you're going to wear a red one. That's really fucking weird. But like, you don't need to make this massive point China, about
BT dubs.
Yeah, whatever. But they don't do it in the United States, right? But like, it just like
I was saying that as a joke for them being so like anti-tradition. It's like in China, that's actually they've been doing that for thousands of years. Sorry,
you're forced to wear a red wedding dress.
Exactly.
But no, like it wasn't like I just want to be different, and if you don't like it, then fuck you. It's my wedding. It was like, well, these are the oppressive chains of a patriarchal society pushing women through this lens of purity when we're not that. And it's misogynistic and wrong to do these things. It's just like, oh my God, shut the fuck up. Like, do you live that life? Like somebody is blowing 30 grand on your wedding, Tiffany. Like, shut the fuck up. Like no one cares, but it was just shit like that,
Right. They went from being the annoying person at Thanksgiving dinner to be like, okay, they're the annoying liberal, to being like,
to a senator.
Now nobody gets to do Thanksgiving dinner because it's based on colonialism and right? Like,
right.
But therein is the religious practice of it. No, we have to do away with it altogether.
Artificial turkey burger.
Yeah,
Tofurkey.
Exactly. But anyway, I think we've stalled you long enough, TJ.
No worries, man. I actually like the riff that you went off on that, and I have a theory behind that really quick on this. If you think about boomers and you think about Gen Xers, a lot of times people say that they kind of nag a lot of different things, and the millennials were asked basically when the idiot behavior comes about, the wise man turns to you as you go, well, I'm going to wear a black dress to my wedding. Why? What's the reason?
To be different.
And rather than just the simple answer, which would have been to be different, that's not a great enough justification. So it turns into these massive stories about oppression and all these other things.
Yep.
But here is something, since I'm a little older than you two gentlemen, that I will remind you of if you don't recall. At the end of the 90s and the beginning of the millennium, there was a massive string of advertising campaigns that said, break the norm, destroy tradition, make your own traditions. They had messages like this deeply engulfed in them.
They put them out on Disney, the Disney Channel, and they had all the young kids at the time, Lizzie McGuire, and
See, I didn't get a lot of that because I was overseas at AFN.
Gotcha.
And it all came out after, like, right after 9/11. It was a big thing, and then we had to start like dunking on American tradition because it was all in pushback of the wave of patriotism that came out after 9/11. But just trying to throw fuel on your fire.
Same
TJ.
tool of destruction, man. It all comes from the left, and it always has. It's their attempt to move us towards that globalist agenda, and it sucks to really think about it that way. But this is a decades-long
predictive programming,
action that's been going on, where they have done everything they have to try to reverse people away from traditional roles, traditional values, and things that keep you morally centered. And whatever the trend is at the time, if it's a trend that has any morality to it, they're going to make sure a trend comes out that will shatter that.
Well, and the first thing to do is espouse it to tradition, and then it's automatically bad because it's old.
Right.
Well, it's 2025 now. I hate that Oh, it's
who
2025
doesn't know?
now. We don't need to do that. It's like, okay, like, are we talking about chattel slavery, or are we talking about you naming your kid Jonathan? Like, what are we talking about? Like, can we find something to cling to, morals and ethics wise? Like, it's so stupid. It is.
I'm not going to be lectured to by anybody that names their kid Skylar. Okay.
Skylar, yeah, whatever. Olive,
Skylar.
Apple. I mean, Olive's an old name, I guess. That's not a good example. Kumquat, whatever. But no, exactly. Like, you get the point I'm trying to make here. It's like
Sure.
I think at first it was just like contrarian to be contrarian, and then calling people out for like, oh, well, you still hold these traditional beliefs. Well, did you know at the same time that people were believing what you believe today, that there were black people who were slaves? Yeah. Well, why do you like when black people were slaves? Well, I don't. I just like suspenders, right? Yeah. Or whatever. Well, that's not a good example either, because suspenders came back when millennials found them, right? So like, whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. It's just like, it's so stupid. All right, go ahead.
Tiring.
I've flipped the
It is
same
tiring.
things back at these folks, man. I like to throw things at them that will tease their little idiocy, like something as simple as candles, which have been around forever, and people make statements like that. Oh, yeah, those traditions were going on at the time of slaves. Well, did you realize most households at that time didn't have electricity either, so they used candles, and those slaves used to have to carry those candles around, help their master find their way down hallways and stuff like that if it was a dark and stormy night. And that candle you got from Yankee Candle Company is a nice symbol of that, so you're keeping that slavery alive right in your own living room, man. Congratulations, you woke retard. So... that aside, we've got some movies that ain't quite woke.
Let's do it.
All right, so here we go. Fun stuff. I should be able to flip straight through these bad boys. New one that just recently came out, Novocaine. I'm sure you guys heard of this movie. Maybe you didn't. I don't know. But this essentially is a movie with a dude who has a disorder to where his central nervous system does not allow him to feel pain. It's like a 1 in 1.2 billion person thing or something. It is a disorder that actually supposedly exists.
It does.
And the average lifespan of people who have that is supposed to be like 20 years old,
very
because
short.
you could accidentally kill yourself very easily, biting off your own tongue or any number of weird freaking things, accidentally swallowing glass, not realizing it was in there. Stuff where, most people would realize something's happened. Forgetting to go to the bathroom for too long and rupturing your own bladder.
Yep.
Stuff like that. So this dude has this system that he lives his life by. That he's managed to make it through life very well with, and he has lived very carefully because of it. And he's kind of hidden the fact he's got all this stuff going on, so he keeps timers on his wristwatch, and he does a lot of things based on timers and everything else. He doesn't eat around people because he doesn't usually chew food, because he doesn't want to run the risk of biting through his own tongue and not noticing it. So he's like a total milkshake dude and all this other stuff. And he has a moment where he meets the girl. This is all within the first few moments, so I'm not giving away any spoilers here. But he has a moment where he sees a girl that just kind of has been exciting him and making him decide maybe he wants to break out of his box and do something. And one day she just kind of asks him if he wants to go to lunch, and
he wants to break out of his box and into hers.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. And it's something that he wants to refuse, and he does initially. And as she's getting ready to walk away, he kind of pops up from his desk and he says, "Hey, yeah, I could do lunch." And this begins this whole thing to where he decides that he's been living this life of total fear and sterility, when in the back of his mind he's always wished he could be kind of a normal guy who gets the girl. And he decides he's going to go ahead and dedicate himself to this. So this gal gets abducted. The dude he's like a VP or something at a bank, or he's a loan officer at a bank, and he sees I think she's not a teller. Excuse me. She's a teller. She's in the teller line, and she's just started there. She hasn't been there very long, so he's kind of had this little crush on her since she started. And when the bank robbers come in to kind of do their thing, he's asked to give a combination to a safe, and they take her as a hostage to get him out the front door. So this dude decides he is going to dedicate himself, based on this mind of reading and statistics he has, being kind of a shut-in, he knows that her chances of being alive are not going to last for very long, and the cops' investigation will probably take too long for her life to be spared. So he's going to take it into his own potentially fragile hands, and it becomes a thing to where kind of the goofy operation picture here that is the movie cover. He uses the fact that he can't feel things to his advantage, basically, as he's going about trying to run down bad guys and figure out where this girl might have been taken. So, very cool movie the way that it runs around. It's comedic, obviously. It's a comedy action movie and is based upon this dude who is willing to give it all up for love and leave his sheltered life and use his weird disorder as a superpower, basically. So...
Cool.
There is, of course, Novocaine. Next, Operation Fortune, one that I assumed was going to be woke as heck because of Aubrey Plaza right here, who has played in some pretty woke movies. This movie is actually excellent to watch. It is extremely entertaining. Jason Statham plays exactly who you'd think he does because he can pretty much only play one role.
Yeah.
He is always
Jason Statham
sort of
is Jason Statham.
Yes.
Exactly. He is the kind
In
of
a world
hardcore
where God
good
made
fight.
Jason Statham is another movie about Jason
right.
Statham.
Yeah, Jason Statham is one of those guys that no matter how many dimensions you come across, he's the same freaking
He's a
guy.
singularity.
There's like the random one who has hair. Like, okay, somebody needs to kill you.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
You look
That's
weird.
terrible.
Oi.
That's terrible. Yeah.
Listen.
Nobody. You reminded me of Rick
you-
and Morty right now. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to hang out with Harry Statham.
Right.
That's funny.
That's freaking awesome. But this movie I thought was going to have some kind of tweak stuff in it. It turned out to be excellent. I'm not going to give anything away on it, but this gal is the noob of their crew after something goes wrong with a previous member, and she is not the throwing around all the men and doing this and that. Instead, she is a techie, and she spends her time in his ear messing with him, flirting with him, saying inappropriate stuff to him while they're like running, jobs and stuff like that. It is actually extremely entertaining, the conduct that goes back and forth between the two of them and how he tries to tune her out so he can stay serious and do his Jason Stathamery.
Oh, shoot. There's Josh Hart in it, too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Where's
yeah.
he been?
Yeah, Hugh Grant is in it, of course, right in the center here, which, every once and again, some little odds and ends come about, but yeah, it's actually a really, really good movie. It was one that I had a fun time watching, so definitely can suggest that one. Nobody, dude.
That was a good
love
one. I've seen this one.
I haven't seen any of
movie.
these.
Oh, dude, you have to see this movie, Brandon. Have to. If you're going to pick one out of these right now that you're going to watch, if you love an action movie, watch this strictly for the fact that you're going to get the gem of Christopher Lloyd being in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
actually.
dude. Christopher Lloyd plays the dude getting punched in the face right here's father in this movie, dude.
Yeah.
And his character is just hilarious, man. Especially at the age you can anticipate he is, because this is
Yeah, I
another
know, he's old as
2004
fuck, dude.
film. Oh yeah.
I mean, he was
You can see,
balding
of course,
and had white hair in Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
Yeah,
I know, dude. When I saw him pop up in this, I had no idea he was in it when I was watching this movie for the first time, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's Doc.
Wild.
What's Doc doing?
Yeah.
Like, why is Doc here?" But you can see it is from the writer of John Wick. It is a great freaking action movie. Long story short, to give a quick synopsis about a dude who used to work in a kind of specialized department of being a closer, somebody who comes out and kind of takes care of business. He's a nasty guy. He's your Jason Bourne type who is retired and lives a lovely suburban life of calm. And something triggers his life back into where he is put in a position to feeling as if he's let his fire go, his manhood go, and he decides that he is going to reverse that and start standing up to all the crap he sees going on around the community and everything else. And it is a freaking wicked.
Two things about this film that I absolutely enjoyed, because it bills itself as like kind of like an action film. It moves a little slower than a traditional action film, but the character development is great. And if you want to watch a movie that shows you what a fight scene actually looks like, and the amount of damage that a person is going to take, because anybody that's seen a trailer for it is going to see, he does the scene on the bus where he just stops, these cholos get on the bus, they're messing with a young lady, and he knows exactly what's going to happen if he gets off the bus and leaves them all there with her. And so before leaving, he stops at the edge of the bus. They're like heckling him and whatever, and he just turns back around and he looks at him. he like the door of the bus closes and he steps back up and he goes, "I'm gonna fuck you up," and that's what he tells like all these gangbangers.
He's got a piece on him, and he empties it out and drops it.
Yeah, he drops it. Yeah, and then
what are you gonna do, old man?
And then he starts fighting these dudes. But I'm telling you right now, that fight scene was phenomenally filmed, and it is a no holds bar. Like he does not get out of that without taking damage. Like he limps away from that fight, but he wins it, right? So that scene was cool. And then the dynamic between him and his family, I thought was great. They didn't bill his wife as like, he's been kind of letting her take the reins. Like you said, he let the fire go out and blah, blah, blah. But that moment when he he's going to take back control of everything, and he tells the family to go to the panic room and you stay down there until I come back. And it's like you watch the dynamic of the family shift where all of a sudden the wife realizes like, oh shit. And the family dynamic at work that you see that they put into the film was absolutely fantastic, I thought.
For sure.
And yeah, it's a great film. It's definitely worth, I think it's like just under 2 hours. It's worth every minute of it.
Okay, I'll have to find
Tons
it.
of fun, for sure. Absolutely awesome one. Beekeeper.
Is that Jason
Jason
Statham also?
Statham movie.
Another Jason Statham. I'm starting
Yeah.
to
So
sense a
do
theme,
This-
dude.
this movie
do
is
all
awesome
bald
all the way
men
through.
just like all other bald men, TJ?
Yes, that is
Okay.
You guys have a secret network.
Right.
Yeah, we do.
You all talk.
And I can't talk about that.
You guys just
but
send each other
nonetheless,
dick pics? Probably, right?
which are also bald.
Yeah.
There you go. TJ's like, I have quite the extensive collection of Merkins.
Oi, did you realize I keep bees? Yeah.
That's freaking awesome. So this was another great movie that was about exposing corruption in a couple different places. Number one, it's in the scams that go on. So essentially, he is seemingly, literally a beekeeper, and the beekeeper is also a phrase that is used as like a secret organization that we're a part of. More of these kind of these government ghosts.
Of course,
And
it's a Jason Statham film.
exactly.
I assumed
But
that. I
he's
assumed
kind of
beekeeping
retired to a
wasn't
peaceful
what he
life
was
as well.
actually doing.
Well, he was really a beekeeper, truly like a really good beekeeper, and it was how he kind of meditated, kept his life.
Gotcha.
He was close to a woman that you guys will recognize when you see her. I was actually very surprised to see who it was. You'll recognize her from a very, very popular show that had a husband and wife. There were a doctor and an attorney with their family. One of the most popular sitcoms there had ever been. Good old African-American family who the
Mrs. Huxtable?
star and name. Yep.
No way! I just
Alyssa
pulled that out of my
Rashad,
ass.
Yeah, for real. And she basically gets scammed by one of these freaking internet scammers.
Nice.
And loses everything, and it turns into a huge deal. So he starts finding the networks and going to these call centers and wiping these people out, but in
he's Jason
awesome fashion. So that's something you can certainly respect. But as he goes up the chain through it all, he realizes these guys are financially backing some politicians, and they are networks that actually work with the politicians' kids, your Hunter Biden kind, and it roots up to where there is knowledge of it towards the top, basically. So this level of corruption is creeping right up into the gov, which, hey, we've seen it. And for a movie like this to have come out in 2024, being produced during the time of the Biden-Harris administration was a very cool little slap in the testes, man. And I really respect that. So it does give you a reflection of it, and the character of the politician's son that's wrapped up in all of these call centers and crap like that and making mad bank off of it is very Hunter-esque, just younger. So, yep, very, very fun stuff there as well. Definitely great action movie, excellent action scenes in it. This one is very new and very, very good.
Oh.
I'm
Sigourney
blown away
Weaver,
by how
huh?
good as this is. Yeah, Sigourney Weaver is... well, I'm not going to give anything away on that, but yes, Sigourney Weaver is not a major character in it, but she's
Apple TV.
not good.
Okay.
So you've got Miles Teller. He's a guy I don't know a whole heck of a lot about. I've seen him in one other movie. He's a good actor. Another decent action actor, decently spoken as well. He's a good visual actor. He plays roles very well. He has good body language, I guess you could say. And Anna Taylor.
He's in Project X.
Joy, the big eyeball freaking... what is it? Now the name's slipping my mind. Queen's Gambit, is that what it is? Is that the name of that movie or show series or whatever?
Is
it
this
was?
a show or is
Came
this
out
a
recently.
movie?
No,
Yeah,
this
that
is a
was a
movie.
show.
But she's
Oh.
in it. That Anna Taylor-Joy. She's got really big eyeballs, redhead, and she kind of was all over the place after that whole chess player thing.
Taylor-Joy.
Yeah. So she is in it, and essentially what it is there's two towers across this
okay.
gorge. There's an east tower and a west tower. West tower is usually occupied by people who are from
Yes,
Western
Queen's
Europe,
Gambit.
the United States. Eastern tower is usually occupied by people who would be part of countries that were parts of the former Soviet Union, essentially. As you can see at the bottom, it says they're not keeping you out; they're keeping them in, and that is essentially what it is. These people are solo on either side. They're assigned to be out there at that gorge for 365 days, and they live alone. The rules of it basically are you don't go near the gorge. You got to check all these different perimeter things all day long, basically, to make sure that all the mines are working, the automatic gun turrets are working, etc., and all the satellite equipment is working, and that you are not supposed to contact the other tower at all, period.
But they do.
It's much better than I would have anticipated because, of course, her character is supposed to be sort of an elite sniper type that comes from,
Okay.
you know, like a Russian upbringing of a father. And I thought, man, they're going to do this fucking stuff again. But this dude actually is even better, and is like, you know, one of those top in the world kind of dudes who does not try to count the bodies, but he has left the service and he gets kind of called back. Sort of like if you guys have seen Shooter.
The
Which is a
original
great
one
movie.
with
Yeah.
Marky Mark, or
Yes.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. Like a dude who just wanted peace and kind of tried to stay away from everything, moved on. He was a great sniper, great scout sniper pair from the Marine Corps, and ended up being, you know, sucked back in. Told that this
Every
is,
time
you
I
know,
get out,
huge thing.
pull me
Exactly.
back in. Yep.
Exactly. And was sucked back in because he was expendable, basically. Had no immediate family, wasn't in a relationship, no children. So gives you a little hint right there. But this actually evolved into a pretty freaking cool movie, kind of sci-fi-ish. Very neat.
Dude, I just want to say real fast, there is a podcast out there called The Tower, and basically what it is there's a guy who takes the job as a fire lookout, and he goes up there, and you know, he's taught, like, you know, you can communicate to these other towers, makes this friendship with this girl at another tower, and then slowly starts to realize that, like, there's shit going on that shouldn't be. And, you know, there's like this element of like a monster, an element of him being like drugged and something happening to him in the middle of the night. And then he starts getting suspicious of the other towers that they're lying to him. It's actually, that kind of sounds like what it's actually pretty
Yeah.
good. It's a whole
pretty
story,
cool.
but it's called The Tower. It's really good.
Interesting.
Sneeze button. That's awesome. Yeah, and it could be based out of ideas from that or whatever, but the folks casting it, of course, I mean, I don't have anything great to say about Sigourney Weaver. She still pops
Ghostbusters.
in there, though.
Ghostbusters.
True. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, going back to
Alien.
Aliens and stuff like that, she used to be a great
Which that's
actress,
a-
but
that's
she
a
got
great-
wrapped up in that woke element for a little
Yeah.
bit as well and kind of soiled her reputation.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you brought that up as a point, because one of the things that made her character so great in Aliens, like, it was the character development of it. They didn't try to turn her into a Mary Sue girl boss that knew
Right.
everything. Like, it was because of her brain, and she outsmarted it, and the character development was so great. And
Right.
and Hollywood used to be able to do that, to write stories about characters that were gripping and pulled you in, because you had to have a little bit of the realism that made you connect with the characters. And then when you know, specifically, if you want to talk about the female action star in that one, when they triumph, it's that much cooler to the audience, because you know they overcame that much more in order to get the job done, right? But
Right.
when you get these Mary Sue girl bosses, like what's her nuts in Captain Marvel, and she just inherits powers
Right.
that she didn't deserve, and then she immediately is just the strongest thing in the universe, and like, you know, just zero character development, just because it's like, well, people told me I couldn't, but now I can, so now I will. And you're like, that's not a gripping storyline for anybody, and it's lazy writing, because she accomplished nothing in order to become the hero. So she doesn't even like earn the mantle of hero. You know, it's not like when Captain
Right.
America is chosen because he's literally the scrawny, sickly kid that isn't even allowed to join the military, but it's all he wants to do. And then so he cons his way into the military by visiting every recruiting station throughout all of New York till he's able to con his way in, and then finds his way into basic training. And then it's his character that's recognized above all of these other guys that were chosen for their stamina and speed and strength and all this. But it was the character that they recognized, because at the end of the day, he was the only person willing to dive on a grenade to save all these other people that have only been evil to him the whole time, because team before self and country before team and mission above all else. And they go, you know what? That's the character that needs to have the super soldier behind it. And so that's how he becomes Captain America. And so there's that earning and the hero's mantle and the hero's journey that is just, Hollywood used to write those great stories. Now they've just thrown them all out.
That's right.
The one interesting fact about Sigourney Weaver that I've always loved is that prior to her, people used to have to weave their own Sigourneys. If you didn't know.
I wish we had the drum shot, dude.
That's
So
freaking
fucking
awesome.
dumb.
I love it.
All right.
It's perfectly stupid. I love it.
You're welcome.
Hovering above us right now, of course, is Boss Level. Now, this is a Frank Grillo film. If you haven't followed Frank Grillo, he got into the acting scene way freaking late in life. Like, his first movies that anybody might even recognize him from were done in his late 40s. He is in his mid to late 50s in this movie. He's an incredible action star. He is a guy who keeps fit by martial arts, boxing, and a lot of different weight exercises. He's another dude who kind of lives fitness like Joe Rogan. He is one of those anomalies to where he is far older than he should be to be in the shape that he is in. He's in fantastic condition, dude who looks like he's a lot younger than he is. He's actually an excellent action actor. He does good with verbal roles and everything as well, but this is a really cool time loop thing. This is like the action movie of Groundhog Day, man. It is something that was, and I'm not going to even tell you how it comes about.
Okay.
But essentially, this dude wakes up constantly to be getting up about 2 minutes before a helicopter shows up and starts shooting through the windows of the place that he's in a high rise. And then as soon as he manages to thwart that particular chance of death, there's a dude who comes busting in the door, and so on and so forth. And it is a constant fight. He always dies and starts all freaking
That sounds
over
like
again.
the Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt movie, Edge of Tomorrow.
That is exactly what it brought to my
Kind of,
mind. It kind of sounds
but
like
not.
Looper meets Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
It would be, but not at all.
Okay,
And
all right,
you
all right.
have to watch it for the entertainment factor of it. The stuff that goes on in it is absolutely freaking phenomenal. And when it turns out the reason that it's happening is pretty cool.
Okay.
So essentially, the dude's living the same stuff over and over again, and he is trying slowly to put together pieces to figure out why it's going on, as anybody would be, unless, you just were comfortable with that. But it's like within, every time he gets a little bit further and the movie starts where he's been at a roadblock for a while, and he continuously dies in the exact same general spot in whatever
this
random
one's intriguing
fashion.
me. I'll definitely have to check that
So
one out.
it's a great freaking movie. It was one that was hyped up. It was a Hulu original, so I didn't think a lot of that to begin with, but I had seen a handful of older Frank Grillo movies from years prior by coincidence, looking for action movies that weren't freaking woke. Found this dude as an action star in some movies that were actually really good, and then lo and behold, I look him up, and he's got this new movie coming out at that time, and I thought, man, that's freaking wild. So went to check it out. It's a wicked freaking movie. Super entertaining from front to back, man.
Well, I definitely
So,
I see my boy the Patriot in there, so that's enough to.
Yep, you can see Mel Gibson hanging
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, so
Sure
that's
enough.
enough. That's enough. All you would have had to say is like new Mel Gibson film. I'm like, oh, okay.
Absolutely.
There's a handful of famous faces in it. Absolutely.
I see that.
No question there. So kicking on. This was a very recent one that I just watched with my wife. It is, I've never been on drugs, but if I had to try to give a description from what I hear hippies talking about and everything else, this is like a horror movie acid trip, weird stuff all wrapped into one, and it is
Interesting.
ridiculously freaking entertaining. Little gory, but it's funny gory.
Okay.
It's not
Humorous?
like weirdo Saw gory to where it's like just torture and horrible things. It's hilarious. This dude is your everyday guy who's in a semi-failing relationship. He's kind of a nerdy guy who works in a sound studio. He is He's a postmodern freaking musician. He plays a genre everybody hates, basically. And he's been working on an album for like years and years and years and
Chinese
has never been able to finish it. So his girlfriend's kind of tired of him. He hates his neighbors. He has a sensitivity to excess noise. He likes to be in his little apartment-built studio, and he's constantly getting interrupted. So, of course, it's called Destroy All Neighbors. You can lend that to your imagination as to why that is the theme. And this dude, who you see right up here with this kind of crazy face, is like another sort of Russian portrayed guy who's the new neighbor, and he's loud and obnoxious all the freaking time, and he's also a total nutcase. So this develops into something really, really fun, believe it or not. And yeah, it was entertaining all the way through, but it is an absolute like weirdo trip movie.
All right.
And if you want to watch something that is completely off the wall and different, falls into the horror comedy genre for sure, is certainly a comedy horror movie, and it is very, very funny and just ridiculous. Whoever came up with it, very creative. Shudder original. So if you guys know the horror world right now, Shudder is one of the companies that's actually putting out decent horror movies still. So they do a lot of shorts and stuff like that too. But this is a full board movie that was put out by Shudder themselves, and it's cool for sure. Fun.
Dope.
One. Moving from that, of course, this one I'm sure you've seen out and about. Now, this movie is on. I'm on about a 75-25 on this. So of course we've got good old Hugh Grant again.
All right.
Heretic. Movie basically, plot of it is two Latter-day Saint girls show up at this guy's secluded cottage-style house.
I've wanted to see this one, not going to lie. I've seen the trailer for it.
Yep. They give a little tappity-tap-tap. Dude is weird. Total weirdo. Invites them in out of the rain, and things get totally freaking freaky. Movie is absolutely phenomenal all the way up until the ending, man. And it is like, it's one of those ones
piss you off because it sucked, or is it just like...
It irritated me at the end because it seemed as if they were trying to move towards a degree of different concepts of how it should end, and they just couldn't land on one. So they just kind of piled them on. And that I hate it when that happens because it developed so freaking well. It's worth watching, but you still want to punch yourself in the jaw at the end of it. So
like Return of the King.
Forewarning without any
Great
spoilers.
movie. The last half of it is all endings.
and this one, I mean, it's not even the last half. It comes down to like the last 25 minutes, 25 minutes, and then all of a sudden you're like, what the, man? Could you guys just not, you couldn't figure out how to close it. It's like somebody who wrote a really, really good song and they just can't figure out how to end it. That's exactly kind of what happened with this movie.
Fade out.
That's right. That's right. Just fade out.
How do we stop? Just fade out.
Moving from this one over to something that a lot of people would have anticipated would probably be woke and terrible. Beetlejuice. Original cast is almost 100% intact, minus the deceased, of course. The guy who originally played Otho, dead. And, jeez.
So I will I'll give it to you on this one, that it is not woke to what we said. But I actually didn't enjoy this one as as a sequel. And it's really not because of anything woke. I just didn't think. I thought in order to continue the story, because I actually watched them back to back. You guys will probably admonish me for this one, but I hadn't actually seen Beetlejuice all the way through until last year. And I decided it was on the list of movies. Brandon and I actually had a conversation about this, and I was like, all right, I had seen many of the clips and most of the scenes in big segments, but I had never sat and just watched it from beginning to the end, like opening to credits. So I did, and I was like, okay, I see why it's such a cult classic. And then I watched this one very quickly after because the item was still hot, and I just thought they rewrote the characters in order to make the story happen. And that was my beef with it. Not that it was woke. It's just like, well, that doesn't make sense from that character.
I looked at it from the standpoint of how long it carried off from the original one, because we're talking three decades went by,
right?
And they managed to tie this bad boy back in to where it is still believable. The thing I liked about it is it still had the same feel to it. It was still somewhat slapsticky.
Total nostalgia bait. It was 100%.
And that's what I loved about it is they kept enough to the feel of it. I honestly thought that little Miss Wednesday Addams over here was going to wreck it, because she has definitely been a part of a bunch of woke stuff and did not at all. She actually, this is the only role I think I've ever tolerated her in any way.
I'll agree with you on all those points, yeah.
I'm going to race through these last couple, because this was the transition over to a couple family-friendly ones that finished off. So, of course, Sonic 3 I watched on Christmas Day. Although these Sonic movies are kind of cheesy, for families to watch together, definitely a good movie, not woke in any way. Of course, you got Chris Pratt in there. Got to give a little Chris Pratt respect, and the fact that he has not fallen into the woke machine like so many of the other actors did. He stood by his faith. He stood by his beliefs.
Chris Pratt?
Chris Pratt is Sonic's friend. He's the main donut king, donut lord.
That's not Chris
He's a
Pratt.
police officer.
That's not Chris Pratt. That's
Am I coming off with the wrong name? I might be.
Yeah, it's definitely not Chris Pratt.
It's the other dude. Maybe the wrong name. Let me run down.
I'll get it for you.
See if I can
You continue. Yes. I got you since you're going.
But outside of that, of course, there is
James Marsden.
This one was kind of fun. Oh, is that who that is?
Yeah, James Marsden.
Oh, I thought
but it was Keanu Reeves that voices Shadow.
That is correct. Yep. Yeah. Keanu Reeves does voice Shadow, and it's one of the only times you hear his voice and you can't tell right off the bat that it's Keanu Reeves.
I agree with you.
Which is kind of interesting, because
my kids absolutely loved it. I've become very bored with the Sonic films, but I took them to theaters to see it, and they were beside themselves with excitement. So I'll give it that.
The most recent one that I watched here was The Day the Earth Blew Up, which we just recently saw in theaters. It's a Looney Tunes film. Obviously, it is a Daffy and Porky Pig film.
Interesting
duo.
duo.
It is a sci-fi kind of alien-y thing. It is lots of fun, and it brought back the Looney Tunes feel of when they revamped and brought all the Looney Tunes cartoons and the Animaniacs back out in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
It is done in that same fashion, with that same development of the characters, their personalities, and everything else. So they brought it back to a time where things were still cool and kids really enjoyed this stuff, and that was I think what was so neat about this one.
Yeah, I definitely thought that when they started using the cartoons to push woke, that was where my heart started to break the most.
Right.
And Disney was terrible about it, but Warner Brothers doesn't get a free pass either, because they definitely started pushing that stuff too. And it's like, dude, I've been watching some of these characters since I was in diapers. You know what I mean? And the fact that you took something that was beloved IP from me, that's exactly what it felt like. Actually, it's like you took that from me. That was part of my childhood, and you took it because it had to be reimagined. You know what I'm saying? Like, it had to be torn down. And
it's just more of that anti-tradition shit that we were talking about before, that they just have to have, It's not original just because you made the character black, or you made the best friend gay, or whatever. Right. It's not original. It's not original. You just change it. It's like the whole thing with Snow White. If you want to make a movie with a strong female character lead, and she's trying to be the leader she wants to be, or whatever the hell she said in that interview, then make a movie about that. There's a genre for that. There's an audience for that. Stay true to that, and that audience that enjoys those sorts of movies will go see it. Don't veil it with the name Snow White and make it something it isn't, right? When Disney, I remember, started coming out with these live action films, I thought that they were just going to stay true to the cartoon movies. Obviously, you're going to have to change them a little bit because you're now involving real people or whatever. And, some movies have, their own, little spins on it, like the Aladdin one with, Jasmine gets that whole, cameo where she's singing about, I won't go silent or whatever, which isn't really, that's not in the movie. But it's an undertone of, Jasmine's frustration with not being able to make her own decision about who to get, who to be married to. But it doesn't have... It's just one of those minor changes that doesn't affect or throw off the whole course of the movie, But this is just oh, well, it's Snow White, but it's completely different. It's just Snow White in title only, There's an audience for that. You don't need to kill everything. It's not original to rewrite everything. It's not. It's stupid.
Right. See, but what you just said there, destroying everything is the point.
Right.
Tearing it down is the point. And I think that's what a lot of people haven't rectified in their mind yet, because it's why do you keep making bad movies? And it's no. The point is to take something that you love and shit on it. That is the point, because they're saying it was not a good thing. it would have been good if it would be like this in my modern understanding of, politics and culture. Now it's good. It's tearing it down from you, and it's almost like a media form of like a reformation, or a media form of like a reclamation that they're doing. They have to march through the institutions and reclaim all of this IP that was laid down in a former era, and then tear down these statues or these works of art, if you want to call them that, and then in their place erect something new. It's the same reason that they have to tear down all the old statues, and it's the same reason that they have to tear down the beloved art form. It's the same reason that all of this amazing architecture has to go, so that we can in its place put up something. It's the same thing that they're doing. This is just the media version of it. But I do think, and I appreciate, that was quite an exhaustive list, TJ. I didn't realize it. But thank you for going through all
that. It was 11.
Yes. But I did think that it was, I don't know if you did this on purpose or if it was just by happenstance, but I definitely noticed that, there for a while it was like the standby classic action hero trope movie. And it's like, it's okay to do an action hero trope movie. It's okay to go to a film and just be like, oh, it's a Jason Statham film. I know exactly what I'm going to get for my $16, and I sit down with my kid and my popcorn, and I'm not disappointed. Hollywood was built on foundations like that. You know what I mean? So I thought it was I thought it was cool that so many of those were just like readily in there.
Yes,
because it's almost exactly as if in order to do something that's non-woke, they're like looking through their bag of tricks and they're like, oh, what will these people still go watch? Jason Statham kicking ass? And people are like, yeah, actually, I'll go see that.
For real.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
Awesome. Well, sweet. Well, do we want to jump onto something of yours there, Chris, in the interim, since that one went a little longer? I figured that'd be like a 15-minute deal. It went 30.
Well, I wasn't expecting you to give a synopsis and a critical film review of each one.
True.
No, I'm
awesome.
Honestly, I'm good if I'm actually good if you guys want to talk about some of your exorcism stories and get spooky a little bit, and then I'm good with that if you guys want to head that direction and then wrap up.
Sure.
Sweet. Okay, well, of course, one of the first ones that I think is an interesting one, and I picked a couple from a fairly decent generational gap, was the story of George Lukens, which was also known as the Yatton Demoniac. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. This was one that took place over in the UK. Basically, he was a guy, 44 years of age, Reverend Joseph Easterbrook. He was an Anglican vicar of the Temple Church, was summoned on Saturday, the 31st of May, 1778, by Sarah Barber. Yes, by Sarah Barber, a woman who was traveling in the village of Yatton Mendip in the county of Somerset in England. The woman told the pastor she came across a man by George Lukens, a tailor and a common carrier by profession that she had known, and he was acting very, very strange. He sang and he screamed in various sounds, a lot of which did not resemble human voices, and declared that doctors could do him no service. Mrs. Barber, who used to reside in Yatton, attested to the clergyman that Lukens had an extraordinary good character, and he attended services of worship as well for most of his life, where he received the church sacraments. However, for the past 18 years, he had been subject all of a sudden to atypical fits, which people had noticed kind of out and about the community, and Lukens believed happened because he had some kind of a supernatural encounter that had knocked him down while he was acting in a Christmas pageant of all things. And Lukens was consequently taken under the care of a Dr. Smith. I'm sure there was plenty of those. He was a surgeon in Wrightington, and a whole bunch of other physicians that saw him over time. All of them tried to help him out. None of them were able to find anything that they felt they could do for him. Not saying they didn't find anything wrong with him, but basically everybody thought something was psychologically wrong with him. So after a 20-week stay at St. George's Hospital, they pronounced him incurable, of course, which is a thing that happened back at that time. They'd just be like, bro, you're incurable. So,
did the leeches work? Nope. Did the bloodletting work? Nope. Did you have him drink small sips of cyanide? Didn't work.
Didn't kill him.
You gotta love old-timey medicine.
Right.
That's right. Well, some members of the community began to think that he was bewitched, and he declared that he was possessed by 7 demons that could only be driven out by 7 different clergymen. So Reverend Joseph Easterbrook Brooke contacted Methodist ministers in connection with Reverend John Wesley, who agreed to pray for George Lukens, which is kind of an interesting thing. So an account of his exorcism was actually put in the Bristol Gazette back at the time. It was a newspaper that George Lukens actually used to deliver. He claimed that he was the devil. He made barking noises, spoke in voices that seemed to be inhuman. He was violent, and on the 13th of June, 1778, 7 clergymen, including Reverend Joseph Easterbrook, accompanied George Lukens to the vestry at Temple Church, where they performed an exorcism on him, which included hymn singing and prayer. The demons were allegedly cast out using the Trinitarian formula. They commanded the demons to return to hell, and George Lukens exclaimed, "Blessed Jesus, praise God," recited the Lord's Prayer, and then thanked the Methodist and Anglican clergymen. Now, the interesting thing, and this is one of the weird symptoms he had when they encountered him, was he was saying hymns and singing psalms backward, perfectly backward. So they went through kind of all of this to show that they felt that he was actually cleansed of the demons and everything. But an article in the Gentleman's Magazine and Historical Chronicle criticized the account, claiming that he suffered from epilepsy, and this was still back in the late side of the 1700s, and they basically, a medical demonologist said that he was an imposter that was masquerading as a demoniac. So another demonologist, somebody who claimed was not a priest but specialized in 18th century demonology, said that it was a guy putting on an act, basically. That the dude was a trained actor, hence the fact he was in a Christmas play and he was putting on an act and he wasn't a real demoniac, and that guy's the only one who fought real demons.
Right.
So, got all that kind of fun stuff in there. But after the exorcism, he was described as a calm and happy person, lived out the rest of his life with no complications, and died basically of old age. So,
man, I gotta be real. I just don't see, when people say okay, you're making up these stories about aliens or ghosts or demons, yes, people do that because they just want the attention, right? You're not gonna get famous. I guess you could point at instances of people getting famous from hoaxes, right? And you could argue whether it's famous or infamous, but most people are not going to gain anything other than mass amounts of notoriety and exile from most people, right? So I find it the very easy, lazy argument just to automatically attribute everybody's story to BS, I think that having skepticism is what you should do, and you should, where you can, demand fact and evidence for things. But I also know that during this time period, and people still do this, people would be purposefully contrarian just to bring upon that same sort of notoriety or fame they're claiming that other people are hoping to have from faking things like this, because it becomes very easy. Like you said, this guy's occupation, he can't prove anything he said, but being contrarian to it makes him, it almost lends him this specific sort of credibility as, okay, it's going to appeal to the group of people that maybe don't believe in it or don't want to acknowledge that it could be real because it's terrifying or whatever, right? So it's sort of like the naysayers online. People say, nope, that's not true. Right?
I was going to say he's an 18th century Trent.
Exactly. It almost becomes just as popular or relevant to do something like that, So,
right.
I mean, his occupation is not a real occupation. How can you be a medical demonologist or whatever in the 18th century? What basis are we having, on this, right? It's kind of like phrenology, the study of the bumps on your head, that was a medical science at one point. We all know that that's bullshit, So it's just kind of funny when you see the names people give themselves, and then to know too, just how easy it was back then. Even though we've not done this episode, but learning about Homeboy from Knights of the Golden Circle, who remade himself over and over and over again, and half of it was just horse shit, right? Yeah. And it's just so easy to back then just ascribe these titles to yourself, because there's no sort of QA on figuring out if what you're saying is actually fact, So it's just interesting.
Well, that's you bring up a really good point, Brandon, because I actually am of the opinion, completely and totally my own. That's one of the things that's going on in the modern post-secondary education system as far as like the social sciences are concerned. Because colleges are money-making operations, right?
Yeah.
Their product is students that they turn out, and they are after sweet, fat government paychecks in the form of Pell Grants and FAFSA loans and stuff like that. And so it only furthers their business model to get more people into college. So it's like, oh, you want to study postmodern feminism in, as it pertains to whatever, fill in, modern sociological terms, then yes. Well, it turns out that Pepperdine University offers a major in just that. And it's like, oh, you want to get your doctorate in, underwater
lesbian dance theory?
Exactly, underwater lesbian dance theory. Then, well, it turns out that through this university you can do that, and they do, and they pump out a lot of these just absolutely meaningless degrees, which I think represents today's version of like the 1800s snake oil salesman, or George What's-His-Nuts, like you were talking about. That's like, oh yeah, I have an advanced degree in medical phrenology, and people are like, ooh, like that sounds, because it says ology on the end of it. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. And I do. I think I think that the snake oil salesman has never gone away. I just think that the post-secondary education system started feeding into the grift because of the ability to monetize it, and especially when the government started paying for degrees. But yeah, that brings up a whole interesting thing. But I do like the point that you made about people being contrarian for the point of it, and that adding a form of necessarily validity, but I guess believability to what might have been going on. Because if you go back, and especially in that time frame, saying that people absolutely on a wide societal scale believed in demon possession back then. Whereas I think now it's more relegated to like paranormal phenomenon and in the realm of like conspiracy theory and stuff. And it's like, ooh, it's a spooky story. Yeah, or something medical. But do people really believe in demon possession now? By and large, probably not. However, back then, to say that, you would have found yourself like completely castigated from society. If he would have come out on the other side of that and said, absolutely, he could have come out on the other side of that and been like, actually, it was a troll because I was proving how good of a method actor I was. Well, it doesn't matter. Like, no acting group would ever touch him ever again. Exactly. Because he would be seen as such a duplicitous person. Like, deceiving people to that scale was not a thing that people did for personal gain. Well, as far as like personal notoriety is what I should say. Like if it's a con or a grift and it's just like, then you take the money and run afterwards. Sure. That stuff happened quite a bit, but
think of the beginning of the year when Matthew Livelsberger took his life, right? And Sam Shoemate went on Sean Ryan with that Proton email and said, here's the signal chat, all this stuff, and talked about it. Immediately, there were these like OSINT, Twitter pages with pretty big followings, immediately cutting it down and saying it's all a lie and here's why I can prove it, right?
Sure.
And then they all got, proven to be full of shit because, over the following days, like things came out to prove that like what he was saying were real. But all they had to do was say it's bullshit. And then give like surface level reasons why they thought it was, because like, oh, well, my experience in the military, or my experience as an intel analyst, or my experience using Signal, or my experience using Proton, like all these things. It just was like these quantifiers that aren't actually quantifiers, right, for anything. Sure. And all they had to do was say, nope, it's bullshit. And they got all this following and it blew up and the algorithm picked them up and they became like the voice for like this movement for a couple of days saying it's all a lie, right? And it was just undone with the truth, obviously, right? But it's just funny, like it's to this point we're making is that like you can just say whatever the fuck it is you think and off the top of your head. And if you've got like this much, right, relevant information that's adjacent to it, Like you're quantifying yourself on the relevant information you have, or like the relevant experience you have, although you're trying to frame it like you're quantifying yourself on the shit you don't know, right? Yeah. It's kind of like when you go to talk to somebody and like maybe you both know something about somebody, and so you just constantly talk about the negative thing about them, and it becomes the quantifier for your own credibility, right? Even though you're not talking about yourself, it's kind of like that situation.
Yeah, you become the guy, and it's one of the reasons, just kind of coming back up to surface level, that I just don't sling mud on the internet. I don't talk shit about people on the internet, because once you climb down to that level and you start throwing mud, then guess what? Like, you're free game, and mud starts coming back at you.
It will.
And a very smart person, gave me the advice when we first started. I started putting face to camera, and he was like, always topics, never people. Like, you can go after their argument, you can refute their arguments, but he's like, never start slinging mud at people, because once you do that, your own credibility goes out the window, because then it just becomes a mudslinging contest about who's right and who's wrong because they don't like that guy or whatever. And to your point, like, you start talking about people that you know or maybe don't know, but somebody else knows that person. And it's like, well, all he ever says is the bullshit. But it's like, I also know both of these individuals, and I'm telling you right now, like, that guy does 100 other things right. But he never, like, guy A never says about the right things that guy B says. Yeah, now you've just become a fucking gossip queen at that point. And you're just throwing mud. And then your own credibility, like I said, goes out the window, because it's like you're not being balanced with the information that you give. And, like, guy C knows that because he knows both of you.
Yeah, it's like, this guy holds this belief, right? So I'm going to talk about the belief this guy holds and call it stupid. And what I'm doing is talking about how the belief is stupid and cutting it down. But what I'm actually doing is calling the other person stupid, right? And it's just like, you can sort of have these I think it's called ad hominem, right? But like these ad hominem ways of talking about people or topics, and make yourself seem relevant without or correct without actually being correct or relevant. And it's just like, I know we've totally gone off this like weird tangent on this conversation, but like it's just funny when somebody is contrarian like that. Like, there's 7 men that went into a church with this guy and went through this whole process, right? Like, I would say that there is more credibility in believing that 7 men were not fooled by one person's act, okay?
Sure.
And now you can point out probably 100 different things where more people were fooled by one person's act. Absolutely, okay? But there's a bunch of factors. Like, here I am, like, my own brain, like, being skeptical, right? Like, okay, well, the commonplace belief, like you said at the time, was that demon, possession was more commonly believed than, whatever other thing. But I'm just saying, right? Like, people still weren't stupid, and people still had the same, like, skepticism and looking for the truth and all this other thing that, we have today, like discerning the reality. And it just, it's kind of funny. Like, oh, well, that's what it is,
For sure.
Yeah.
Well,
and
like
here he is,
even
300 years later,
time,
we're still talking about him. So to our point.
That's right. Well, and back at that time, even, a dozen physicians went through the dude, and the final diagnosis was that he was incurable.
Yeah, what?
So,
Whoa.
Whoa.
How many people you got in there? I don't know.
That's freaking awesome. Well, moving about 150 years forward, we'll move a century and a half forward to South Africa. Clara Germana Cele. Of course, South Africa is a very common place for missionaries to go. And in 1906, there was a 16-year-old Zulu girl that was reportedly levitating regularly. And this is coming from a whole Zulu tribe witnessing this. She was speaking Polish and French, even though she didn't even know how to properly speak their own language and had never learned to read. She stretched her limbs unnaturally, lashing out at people. So like her arms would stretch out beyond their original length. Priests required 8 people to restrain her during the attempts
Yeah, she's
at her
Elastigirl.
multiple exorcisms. So she said that she was possessed when she was a 16-year-old girl because she, I guess to give you a little history, she was an orphan of African origin, of course. She was baptized as an infant. At the age of 16, she made a pact with Satan of her own accord. And she said that this was when all of her demonic events started. She was trying to basically get some personal gain. So she made a pact with Satan to try to get out of some different things that were going on amongst the tribe there, because of course the girls in the Zulu tribes are not treated very well. I guess you would say, they're property. So she had her Jasmine and Aladdin kind of thing on her. She wanted to make her own way, bro. So apparently she decided to make a deal with the devil to be able to get out of whatever her fate was going to be decided as by the Zulus, and claims that was when she started having all these weird episodes. So essentially, in an account written by a nun, Clara was able to speak languages which she had no previous knowledge of, even though she couldn't even read. It was witnessed by many others that recorded that she understood Polish, German, French, Norwegian, and a whole bunch of other languages. Nun reported that Clara demonstrated clairvoyance, and she was able to reveal intimate secrets and transgressions of people around her, and she would call those things out when people would try to approach her, restrain her, or try to do things to aid her. So she would call out things that essentially would be from in their minds, secrets they hid, things from their past, and all kinds of other crazy stuff, including people she'd never had contact with. So these wouldn't just be people she was familiar with in the tribe. These would be visiting missionaries, nuns that had visited her from a convent, people she'd never met before. She had tons of strength, a lot of ferocity. She was able to hurl people over, knock down full-grown men that were much larger than her. She would beat up nuns regularly. She would beat up other missionaries that would try to visit, try to restrain her. The primary nun here, Sister Clara, reported that her cries had a savage bestiality to them. They sounded completely unhuman. They would astonish people. They caused people to have to plug or cover up their ears because they were so loud that they would actually hurt people's eardrums. So one of the attending nuns wrote in a journal, "No animal ever made such sounds, neither the lions of East Africa nor the angry bulls. At times it sounded like a veritable herd of wild beasts orchestrated by Satan had formed a hellish choir." The girl, according to some, was said to have levitated 5 feet in the air repeatedly, sometimes vertically, sometimes horizontally. When she was sprinkled with holy water, she came out of the state and she would fall on the floor. According to a Lutheran pastoral handbook, one possessing these symptoms is an indication that an individual is truly possessed rather than just suffering from a mental illness. So yeah, I would say if she was witnessed by people floating, it's probably not a mental illness making you float. Just it's a funny side note.
Never seen an autistic kid levitate.
One of the defining factors to make sure that it's a true necessity for an exorcism under these circumstances. When they were viewing these things in the beginning of the 20th century here, that was one of the elements they were looking for. Had to go beyond the change in voices, had to go beyond the random knowledge of all kinds of languages you'd have no way of knowing, and everything else. But once she levitated, man, that was it. It's like, hold on a minute, there you go. Yeah, she's floating.
She sleeps above
we got
the
a floater.
sheets. 4 feet above the sheets.
So, of course, there was a handful of Catholic priests that had gone through, but 2 Roman Catholic priests that were very well known for exorcism were picked to perform a final exorcism on Clara Germana Cele. The deliverance lasted for 2 days, and during that exorcism, her first action was to constantly knock the Holy Bible from priest's hands. She grabbed one of the priest's stoles in an attempt to choke him with it, and at the end of the exorcism, it was said that the demon was forced out and the girl was finally healed. For 6 years, she lived a demonic possession-free life. She said that basically people around her in the tribe and people from the community said that she often was repenting. She was saying that she felt shame for her behavior. She asked people for forgiveness all the time. She died in 1912 from heart failure at age 22.
Wow.
See,
and
between those 2 stories, I mean, that one is very, very compelling for me.
A lot more details as well, just because of the time and the accounts and everything. Kind of,
but especially because
there's
an account of her, like requesting and accepting, or making a pact with the devil himself. I mean, that is something differences between demonic oppression and demonic possession, there's almost always, like, again, there has to be an inviting or an accepting from a person in order for that level of demonic possession to take count of. And then also things that I've learned from, from even my dad, Pastor Eric, who's had has had a lot more experiences with demons than most. Is like, as a part of the casting out of a demon, there has to be repentance on the part of the person too, which goes into the exorcism, that they have to repent for what they've done, and then also ask for God's deliverance, because they're the ones that accepted a demon in, that invited a demon in. Correct. They're the ones that have to want to be rid of it in the end. So I'm sure that was a part of the exorcism rite that was performed on her.
For sure.
I'm always very interested when I hear accounts like that of priests using holy water as if it's like a weapon, and then they it's like sprinkle it on people, and
bam.
Yeah, and then bam, and then it's like, oh, she stopped levitating.
Right. Get out the sky.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, TJ, you know about this more than me, but holy water is just the water in the chalice in the church that has been prayed over and blessed by a priest, correct? Has been consecrated?
Generally not by the priest. It's usually done by one of the bishops or archbishops overall,
okay.
So that it has kind of that greater, I guess you'd say, level of authority to it.
Sure.
Sometimes it is water that is also brought in straight from Jerusalem. So,
okay.
Just depending on where you're at.
Very interesting.
Yeah, sometimes they improvise, man. If you can't get some of that good Jerusalem water, some Aquafina or something.
I've seen my dad perform some pretty interesting baptisms with what he could get on hand, but
with Aquafina,
I don't know with Aquafina, but definitely I've seen bottled water be used. I know depending on whether or not you believe that baptism has to be fully submerged or if it can be sprinkled. I've definitely have seen some of the chalices behind stage were filled up with bottled water and then brought out for the pastor to use. But all of those were in Protestant settings. That was never in a Catholic church. I think the Catholic Church is where I have the thinnest amount of experience. So, yeah.
Well,
the sacraments there are very, very well shielded.
I believe it. One interesting thing I learned while I was still active duty is that the Air Force, at least at the time, had the only chaplain who was actually classically trained and certified by the Vatican's course on exorcism.
Oh, very
and that the Air Force actually had, and I know his name, Ruderman was his last name, because he gave a class on demonology when I was at Malmstrom. But he actually got the opportunity. The Air Force paid for him to go to the Vatican, and he went through the entire course that the Vatican puts priests through to become exorcists. And and he was a professional exorcist and chaplain in the Air Force, and which is wild. And
that's really neat.
It is really neat, and it also makes you wonder, the Air Force doesn't need to pay for you to do shit, but they paid for this dude to go to the Vatican to get certified, become an exorcist, right? Blessed by the Pope or whatever it is that they do. This dude in the Air Force got to go, and
that's awesome.
Yeah,
he probably studied with the Jesuits.
I don't know what they do. I just know that
the order.
I always thought, what is
commonly involved in exorcism?
It's not common that the military does things outside of its own interests or wastes money. Officers for sure will get to go do shit. It's what the fuck was the point of that other than a feel good for you? Officers can
chaplains going to jumpmaster school. I've
sure.
always wondered.
I've seen officers put that they read a book as an OPR bullet. Read two General Hackworth books. It's okay, you know what I mean? And it's just but I'm just saying, it's not often that the military will front money like that, to go do something like that. And he had, he told us, he's I've performed exorcisms on military members. And it just kind of was a wild thing to me to hear and learn that this guy got paid to go do that. in the military.
I mean, I could.
That actually
certainly
reminds
see-
me, and I'll just say this on camera, but in the list of guests that we're reaching out to, I need to reach back out to a certain Catholic priest that was in my group, because his office actually had emailed me back because he was just out of country doing something, and so it's like I had gotten through to his office and got a return email, but I just haven't doubled down to reach back out to him again.
Oh yeah, please do.
That was like a month and a half ago, but yeah, I definitely will.
That's wicked. Absolutely no. And I mean, I guess I could see the necessity for it in the military, man, because of guys going into so many different countries and so many different situations and some of the things that you may encounter. I mean,
Yeah, I don't deny that it could
the
happen,
susceptibility.
and the need could be for it to be there. But like, that's something like the Air Force and the military in general outsources all kinds of crap. You know,
Right.
Like that's something definitely the military would be like, yeah, that's not our purview at all. Like if you're experiencing some sort of spiritual crisis, like obviously you're allowed to go to a chaplain, and like if you went to your supervisor, like they would encourage you to go to a chaplain. But like once you told a chaplain what you were going through, and if it sounded like that, they'd probably be like, yeah, dog, like you need to go, you know, whatever denominationally, like you need help outside of this office, right?
Right.
And so just like I say that to say that yes, you're right, like you could see why they would like have a need of it, but it's something the Air Force or the military in general would just tell you to outsource, right?
Right.
I
It's weird
doubt
they
that
internalized
like
it. I
they're
gotcha.
I mean, like I don't know, you know, I doubt that they're flying homeboy around to every military installation
Probably not.
just to be the dude to perform these things. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they found, you know, so it could just be, and this is just my, you know, again, speculation, that they could have just done it because there was an opportunity to go and he had really good leadership and they decided to send him, right? Which happens. And they will make way more excuses to send officers to crap than they will anybody who's enlisted, right?
Sure.
Or there is a grander scheme to this, and they did decide we're going to send an Air Force chaplain, a Catholic priest, to go to the Vatican to become an exorcist. And they paid for it because they quantified it somehow.
You know, how badass would that be, though, in understanding like spiritual warfare versus like, you know, because, you know, Scripture tells us we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of
Right.
darkness in this present world, right? So it's like if you look at it, how badass would that be if Homeboy was like an airborne exorcist, and they're just the
Bro,
Air
just
Force
dropping
is
in
just,
on fucking
just
target,
just dropping
Halo
in
certified, dude.
with his holy water,
Yeah.
and just the power
With
of
his
Christ
holy water.
compels you,
With his
and
holy
demons
water
are
and a
just
super soaker.
yeah, demons are just getting sent back to hell left and right, dude.
Right, dude.
How badass would
Dude,
that
Super
be?
Soaker 2000.
Just dunked in holy water.
Could you
Basically
fucking imagine?
be,
He's just like,
yeah.
all I imagine is just like John Constantine, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's John Constantine. It's Captain Constantine, bitch. You know?
That's right.
Just little
I think-
ampules of holy water, bro. Like he
got
just
a- he's
walks
got a
into your
big
dorm room and just like smacks you on the forehead with it.
Yeah, dude.
You know?
Just kind of whips it through the window like a freaking
what I'm saying.
flashbang.
Dude,
Right,
that's
dude.
what I'm saying, man.
Like he
the
just
holy
he's got,
hand
like,
grenade.
a modified 50 cal, and it's just like an absolute laser beam of water.
That'd be dope, dude.
Yeah.
It's freaking awesome.
I
A
feel like we
petawatt
should watch
laser.
that into a movie. We could write that into a
For real.
badass movie, dude.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We got to get Keanu for it before he's
Have
too
to.
old.
The
though.
airborne exorcist.
That's right, dude.
We get it going quick. Well, I wanted to throw a little icing on the cake with this one because the first thing everybody is going to say is, yeah, but all these accounts are always old. Well, this one isn't. This is from 2021, and this is a quick one I'm going to toss on
Yeah,
here.
then
This
we'll
one
wrap
has
up.
been validated from 1,000 different places. So Roman Catholic priests in northern Italy had to perform a 9-hour exorcism out of nowhere on a 26-year-old woman after she became violent in a confession and started hurling insults in several languages, including traditional Latin. The woman who has remained unnamed for privacy purposes at this point, arrived at the St. Mary of Mount Barico Church in Vicenza, Italy on Sunday, December 5th, 2021. The young woman had already been seen by an exorcist in Verona, but on Sunday her parents brought her there, probably to have her go to another curing an evil that she had suffered for some time, Father Carlo said. But the woman's father was convinced his daughter was suffering from a psychiatric problem. The mother, however, thought that her erratic behavior resulted from demonic influences and wanted her to see a priest. At the church, which is a site where 2 miracles have previously been reported of sightings of the Virgin Mary fully appearing in the 15th century, she took confession. During her confession, her body began convulsing. She became highly agitated. She started screaming in Latin and tearing things apart. Friars from the Order of the Servants of Mary called upon 80-year-old Father Giuseppe Bernardi, the official exorcist of their church, to come on out. So an 80-year-old dude put on the armor of God and rock and rolled in here. So he came out and they said that basically they recorded that he said, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I order and command Satan to leave this person." He repeated it constantly. The prayer was echoing around the 15th century church as people held her down and the Catholic ritual was performed for 9 hours. His presence was not enough and 3 other friars joined the exorcism. Exorcists from other Italian dioceses were also contacted to participate in prayers. An online Catholic news website had reported one gave advice remotely via video as well to try to aid these guys.
They zoomed him in, dude.
They zoomed.
That's wild, dude. That still has power.
Father, he was just advising them. He
Still,
wasn't actually participating in it, but yeah.
From everything I've understood, though, like everybody involved has to have like conviction, rock solid, like
Well,
yeah.
you bring up a
sure.
really interesting thing, Brandon, because there is an account of Jesus casting out a demon in Scripture where his disciples tried to cast it out first, and they were not. They were unable to do it, and Jesus sees the person and immediately casts the demon out, and the disciples ask Jesus, like, "Why were we unable to do it? We did all the things that you told us to do, right?" And Jesus looks at them and he goes, "It's not your fault, basically. This type can only be removed through prayer and fasting," which is very interesting. And it's like there's a lot of stuff to extrapolate out of there that I don't personally understand all of it, but it does lend the idea to some demons are either more powerful, or maybe he was talking about the demon was possessing the person for much longer, and so like because of that it gave it more strength to cling to the person, or like I'm not sure what Jesus meant by that. But to the story that he's telling, if they are bringing more priests in from around the world to just be like, hey, we need some advice and we need some people to start praying over this demon immediately, like we know, and Scripture tells us that one of the most powerful weapons that we have is just prayer and taking it to God and understanding. So that's actually pretty incredible. And they were just like, hey, get Father so-and-so on the Zoom call, and somebody like runs up with an iPad and like holds
Could
it
you
up.
imagine though,
so
like
this-
in the middle of like a horror movie, like somebody just busts out a laptop and Zoom dials somebody? It would sort of take away from the
I know.
right,
I
but
get
it's
where
just
you're
so
coming from.
funny, like it's like that happened, it's not what you'd
and
expect.
the funny thing with this is, of course, the gentleman who was kind of advising on this was a guy by the name of Father Rosato, and he could see it. Like they had everything turned towards this so that he could witness this just through the webcam, right?
Wow.
And he said that he could see that she was screaming, she was overpowering people much larger than her, overpowering multiple individuals. She was cursing in multiple languages, and he could tell that the presence of the evil one was visible. So worshipers and other people who worked in the church were all escorted out that had witnessed this, and they all gave accounts that they saw this happening as well. The doors were then barred. Many stopped and prayed outside the church during the exorcism as well. The police and an ambulance were at the scene, but they were not permitted entry. After the ritual, the woman fell into a deep sleep, which is a very common thing after a successful exorcism, and the friars stated that it was a sign that their exorcism was successful. Father Rosato, the guy who was, it was zoomed in basically, noted that the liberation cannot happen immediately. It depends on the strength of the presence of the entity of the evil one. The stillness and the silence of the sanctuary penitentiary were suddenly torn apart by screams and curses of a girl. The attack on a father confessor who was immediately rescued by the brothers. Flight of the Faithful. Terrified while the room was barred from the inside. On Sunday, the Basilica of Monte Berrico was the scene of a difficult exorcism, they reported. So it did actually end up being successful, but basically the Journal of Vincenza, put this big headline out, the attack on a father confessor who was rescued by his brothers was, kind of the whole deal there. So that is how that rolled down. But yeah, that was December 5th, 2021, right in Italy.
That's crazy. I've always wanted somebody to explain more in depth to me, other than the very surface level conversation I had with somebody once about the hierarchy of angels and how it translates into, the hierarchy of the demonic, basically, right? And how different angels have different purposes and abilities, and so too those become inversed, right? And there's still their specialty, even though they are now on the other side, is a very interesting idea.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's deep stuff.
Yeah.
I would tell you that there's a really great book called I believe it's called Sons of the Gods by Dr. Michael Heiser. If you want to check me on that one, TJ, to make sure I'm getting the title exactly correctly. But it does go into that specifically, which you were just talking about, Brandon, and it is an excellent read. There's even an Audible version of it. But for anybody else that's out there that's interested in demonology and in the hierarchy of spirits and how that works, that's a great book to start.
Is it more of a theological book, or?
It is, yeah. Dr. Heiser was a theologian by trade and author. So it is a very Christian book and a very Christian.
Would it read more like a, if you were going to school for theology, like a textbook? Does it read more like that?
Okay. No, it does not read like a textbook. No.
Got you. Just curious.
No, I would say it reads more like if you've ever read any of A Case for Christ. It's gonna read very similar.
It's just very. It's info dense, right? Yeah.
Yes, but very info dense. Yeah.
Dude has got a ton of books. Reversing Herman, Demons, Unseen Realm.
The Unseen Realm is a great one.
But yeah, the one that you were talking about, the title is correct. It was titled two different ways originally.
Okay.
One of which was Deuteronomy and the Sons of God.
The Sons of God. There we go.
Yeah.
Sons of God.
And then also it was released as Sons of Israel.
Okay.
Which it's all based on Deuteronomy 32:8, but it started off as like a paper, basically, that was converted into a book. It was a paper that he originally put out. So
very interesting.
That is how that kind of kicked. But yeah, he's got all kinds of fun stuff. Reversing Herman, like I said, he's got a slew of books out there, all based upon these same kind of topics by the looks of it. So the Naked Bible, Unseen Realm.
Yeah, and he unfortunately passed away too. So Dr. Heiser passed away, I think 2022, if I want to say right.
He did a bunch of recorded stuff too.
Yep, you can find a lot of
programs.
You can search him out on YouTube and see a lot of the documentaries that he sat down for. There's a really great one on the Unseen Realm specifically.
Right.
Go through all that.
I have to check that out.
Word.
Well,
yeah. I mean, it's over 3 hours, guys. I hope that for everybody listening, that you enjoyed your time on the 100th episode. We should probably do more of these, where it's just the three of us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And, we like to have guests because, we feel like having guests makes the subject matter more diverse. But, we should probably do more of these, man. But, definitely check out the sponsors in the show notes. As always, guys, go check out the merch store, redpillthreads.com/I Came With Fire. And, dude, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys for being fans. Thank you for 100 episodes and sticking with us. And as the show has evolved and devolved and all the stupidity and the live show and all the ways that this show has changed, it is difficult to do something like this. There are so many times where I'm just like fed up with it and done because of the time it takes, and having a family and a full-time job and all these things. And so it really is like, other than the scratch, the itch in my brain that this scratches, you guys, the fans, and the people that actually engage with us about the show are literally the reason why I keep doing this, because it's fun to do this, and it's fun to see you guys interact, and feels like having friends that I have never seen or met. So truly appreciate you guys for listening and sticking with us for 2 years and 100 episodes, and genuinely thank you guys for all the love.
A huge shout out to you, Brandon, for getting this party started and for inviting us along. I know you and Chris have been doing this for a lot longer than I have, but I'm very, very proud to be a part of all of this, and it's great to be able to share this particular achievement and this milestone.
Well, I mean,
with you,
sure. I mean, you keep saying like me, like, yeah. I mean, like, I'm the original founding member, but like, there's much thanks to you guys as well for doing this with me, and the show took a hard change when Chris came on from like what was going on with Zach, and like it evolved, and it got better because of the live shows, and then having you on, TJ, like it got better obviously because of that sweet voice you've got going on over there. And but like, no, it's just like all these little teeny pieces have come together to like make the show. And like, obviously, like, thank you to the fans, thank you to the both of you guys for doing this with me and putting up with my my personality and all the other crap. And it's been 100 episodes. I appreciate that.
I am so excited to be here. Congrats to you, and congrats to us on making 100 episodes. Thank you to the Fire Fam. Thank you to the Dear Americans, anybody out there that's watching this. And Brandon, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this project, and I'm excited to be here. And here's to 100 more episodes, and as you guys know, and apparently has become a thing, go with God, y'all, and don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
God bless everyone.